We ready to get started?
I think so.
Let's get it started. Any public comments? All right, seeing none. Item 2, discussion of the grant-making software. Our Miss Karen is going to take over.
I will get us started, and then I'm going to hand the baton to Angela, so she gets to do all the fun stuff. All right, so where do I find my PowerPoint? Right here. Let's see. All right. Great. All right, so we're here to hopefully have some really great conversations and come up with some really good guidance to get us started in this grant-making process. So for today, we really want to encourage your full participation. We've got some interactive input, and at the end that we have better clarity and understanding for the direction that we want to go in with the application and review process for this funding. So just, Angela and I are fresh off our 2-day stint in Atlanta for our grant maker training where we went over this whole manual, but we won't bore you with all the details with that, but definitely learned some really good stuff. And so one of the takeaways was really about this is a cycle. So, you know, we're in the process of creating the grant guidelines here today, the application process, which will lead us into the solicitation of proposals in October. We'll do we'll call it out for you and make sure that all the applications that we send to you are valid and viable. And then you are there to conduct the full review, decide on the funding, present the recommendations, communicate the decisions, and then manage the grants, and then we start all over again. So all that to say, just keep in mind that this is a cycle. We don't have to have it 100% perfect out the gate. We want it as close to that as possible. But know that, going into this next year, there's always an opportunity to review, add on, change, do some things differently. So it's, a flexible document going through this process. So ultimately, what we want to do is to be able for you to make good yeses and solid nos, and not, have any yes but or maybe, or, we want solid yeses and solid nos at the end of this process. So just a quick review of where we're at. So we're in this final guidelines and applications. So after our meeting today, then we'll get everything put together based on your comments and what you have shared, and we'll develop a draft application for you. And then, so Tuesday, September 12th will be the next meeting. And then you guys had one also on the 26th. So that's the preparation stages that will then launch us into October, where we're going to release the application to the public and invite the community nonprofits to apply. So also in October is when we'll do the formal review process training with you, so that when the application closes in end of October, you'll be ready to go into that review process. So then the second phase of all this leads into the application review schedule, which is tentatively set for December through January, and then moving on through the final processes. Any questions so far about any of this? Okay, perfect. So with that, I will turn it over to Angela.
All right. Good morning. Today's going to be fun. Up until now, we've had a lot of different meetings and have stayed really kind of focused on the beginning part of where we are. Today is where we're going to try to dig into what you are looking for as individuals, and then come back together for some group consensus in building what this application really looks like. So we're going to start with, it's kind of an individual breakout group. We're going to head over here where everybody gets a Sharpie and kind of dig into some of your individual thoughts. So over here, even though it looks like a group exercise, is more the chance where you can start thinking and start sharing what you're broadly thinking that this process is going to look like, what your priorities are, what your feelings for what this process needs to guide. Then this afternoon, we're going to go through the application. We have a draft application for you, and we're going to go through individual steps and kind of dig into more details. So we're going to start really broad, looking for why you're here, what you want to accomplish. This is a public meeting. It is being recorded, and these comments that are here will be, we'll take pictures of them and make that part of the record. When you write comments, if you would, just go ahead and initial so that we know where we're coming from. I'll ask your LLs Lyle and Lynn to work out how that works so we can tell the difference between the two of you. But let us know, as we're looking for this process, it is a very transparent process. It is also a very meaningful and specific that has the potential for a lot of impact, and the decisions that we make are going to guide us into very important next steps. Right now, we're not looking to make a decision. Right now, we are looking to finalize a draft so that when we come back together at our next meeting, you can vote on what that application really zones in on. So we'll try to take it through whatever you guys need. If y'all need us to get specific, then we'll get there. But what we're looking for today is just that level of really digging in. I know you've been thinking about it a lot before you agreed to be on this committee. You came here for a reason, and today we're going to kind of dig into a little bit more what the reason is. So what I'm going to ask you to do is just, before we do that, any questions? All right, I'm going to ask you to come over to the tables and just kind of wander around and just sort of scrawl on there, just some thoughts. What we'll do after we come back together is go through each page and kind of look at those thoughts and just kind of dig in.
Amen. Away we go. Pretty observant on the LLs there.
I am too, for the record.
So you can just kind of wander around to take them in. You can bounce around. The center table, we're going to be changing out the outside tables a couple of different times. The center tables are going to stay. That's where you can just come over here with your questions. You want us to do some research on some specific things, whatever that is, just come over to the center and scroll it in.
So can we write more than one comment?
Oh yeah, you can draw pictures, colors. You can do anything as long as you're aware that it is a public record.
You can shop them.
Do what?
Just run out. Y'all got this? I didn't say anything about that.
He's got some added cost. The man, he's showing a $10 million contribution top camera. That's almost really market.
Yeah, let's see what you're, I bet you get some ideas. free to throw some specifics on there, just writing things like, Boys and Girls Club, Germantown, just some of the howevers.
I'm probably not going anywhere.
Yeah, that was the reported average, right? Yeah. Surely not. No, that's for somebody who doesn't know what they're doing. Right. The more season reports but for a lot of nonprofits that don't have any of that person. Yeah. They don't have time for that. No, I'm not trying to burn. So, do you know what other opportunities there are in the community for nonprofits to secure other funds or other resources that can help out? The purpose of this question is kind of like, we're not going to solve all the problems and be all things for all people.
Right.
And so kind of to recognize that, but also like a general awareness of Black businesses. Is that a word? It is now. Okay. But yeah, that's true.
Can we just fill it up?
Yeah.
I assume if we agree with something someone wrote, we can just put our initials next to it.
Sure.
Just so that we
That'd be true.
not revisiting their will.
What's the thing that covers the electric bills?
The sharing.
There's a small nonprofit.
Oh, community foundation? Not community.
No, community helpers.
Yeah.
But that's not it. They would need us.
Yeah, but they do, like, the utilities do fund them to an extent, so they do work on
Our church does. We just play on it.
Yeah.
Does your church do that?
Do what?
Our use rate goes to the electric bills.
Ours goes to our presbytery for food shortage. So somebody like the nurse can write password grant requests, and our presbytery is writing that grant.
Did you get married?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
So do you think
They're clearing it, but it means they're
Same utilities.
There is, working on the CV water line.
I think their expectation was to see you on the way. There's no pretty water lines.
We talked about that at the construction meeting, CD brought it up. That's very, I don't want to call it soft and look, but it's very not utility work.
Right.
It's really just, utilities cost, you're going to pay for everything.
They have these all over the place, don't they?
That's what I'm saying.
That was our main office, right, so the road.
You're a week.
Looking to see what's going on. Did you call it?
So most of Chris's comments
Very capable design firm.
they're only carrying the message.
I stopped at our
No, I'm not so fancy. What if you got something good?
It's a little sweet. I like it, but it's a little sweet.
Yeah.
Right.
You told him, you told him to find out about Bucky's, they wanted to do stucco.
Do stucco on.
He didn't take the. He didn't take the.
He didn't take the bait, he said, no, you shouldn't.
The test is yet to come, really, right? Like whatever. Which one is that? This one. Figure out what we can do to separate, if it's like the training one, we'll just make use of it, so you'll know how to interact.
These people build these canopies. What do we care what a canopy on Shelby Jackson or
First week in October, is the road.
This is.
We didn't like what they were doing 20 years ago. So we got down here.
I got a phone call today. This plays right into it. And pictures out.
So good.
I sort of, I think I do. Well, that's awesome. Good for you.
Set up into the campus. Look really close. Single arch, a couple little parapets, a couple little things on the end, but it's spread out over 120 fueling stations.
Yeah, it's huge.
I know, it's really big.
So you think you don't pick up on the side? Well, because the standard,
What is it a standard? Is it just
the standard metal boxes that people are putting up 20 years ago. So we can ask them, on the standard, that we can't keep up. Because that's the first thing you see. It's the one that analyzes something, and they're going to put their, with the brand new robot. So we can just use it to do that.
No, sure, I'm gonna walk right here, more to go. You have a thought on your melon?
Like, they can learn from all they need more than that, you know, that's what we do, because it's not.
Yeah, well, you got more than
Yeah.
They have there in the gateway, it's just our standard, our standard campus.
Well, we need to be able to recognize that some of these companies have kind of books, and we're just gonna have to adapt.
Okay. It's working it out.
What constitutes a real exception? When should we all just recognize?
Part of that is, what I really want to do. It's like walking away from other ones and saying, I'm for it. Yeah, don't sit up there. This way, say, well, this is what it says. You need to back off. Just start talking to people. Everybody raises their hands to don't back off, and you're practically clear. I mean, they've got these hard lines. And this is
Flexibility. It's like this, it'll be We candy bar.
Yeah, so one of the things that you want your, especially your younger
Do we need another minute or two, or do you, are we kind of wrapping up? Don't want to hurry you, but it's up to y'all.
L2. Are you LL1?
I'm RLL.
Okay, I'm LL2. We have 1 and 2.
I did the titles, and I try to set the tone that, so that it's fine. Do you want this one too? You'll just kind of feed them, get whatever order you think is good.
Well, you know, they've been only opposing this airport for the last couple of months because they've been paving the runway.
So maybe they're really hard.
Well, they're not paving today, I just saw a plane take off.
Yeah, no, I know, but I mean, like, maybe there really are more planes.
Well, I think there are, I think you're probably right.
MTSU's back.
They're back here.
Yeah, so that may be.
I live just across the street, behind Adams Place.
And
I know that's a Haynes Haven back there.
okay, yes.
Yes, but just walked over here.
Maybe it was somebody else who been brought in for a short time because they had like an ex-military guy.
All right, we ready to talk about it?
Yes.
Before we dive in, I wanted to ask the group, just to continue the conversation going, I want to ask you to share a personal experience as it relates to grant making. So something that you think would be relevant to the group to share, kind of where you're kind of, I'll kick it off. My parents were public school teachers. My mom taught first grade. My dad taught high school metal shop. And from the time I was a little bit older than first grade, I was the, grade papers. My mom decided to get into grant making as a first grade teacher. And so, in middle school, high school, I was her proofer. Her first grant was, she got a telephone in her first grade classroom so that if the kid did something they were proud of, they could call somebody and tell them all about it. That was like the 80s, self-esteem was very important, right?
Yeah.
So that was my first interaction with grant making. She did a lot. She wrote one for my dad. He was a metal shop teacher, and she got the first laser engraver with robotics that Dayton County had ever seen. It's good times. So anybody want to share like just something about grant making, an experience that you have and an interest that you have that brought you here?
I know nothing about grant making.
How did you go this path?
Just the desire to help our community. Our company has helped a lot of people. We've helped Hopgood School for years, bought uniforms for all the kids that needed them. And without any recognition, we didn't want anything like that. It was just a matter of helping. And so it's just part of my nature, part of my dad's nature.
It's fun.
Okay, back when I had brown hair, I was chairman of the Red Cross, and we were largely supported by the United Way. And we worked, of course, hand in hand with United Way. And it worked well back then, where they were the fundraising, grant-making group, and we provided the services.
Well, I was in the initial creation of the Schools Foundation, and so I enjoy being a part of that process. And also I did this, at the very same time, I created the fundraising mechanism at the Discovery School, which created funding for their science lab and also the funding for the science lab instructor and all that. So I liked being part of the process for how to decide where the money goes. So.
Very cool.
Okay, Alive Hospice. I was on the board in Nashville, and we decided to do the residents here. originally went to Christy Houston, wrote a grant for that. We wrote several, and we opened it, and we raised, they gave us $3 million, and we raised, with grants, $3 more million to match, and we built the residence at Alive Hospice. Then I was on the Tennessee Breast Cancer Board, and we wrote a grant to Pfizer, and they gave us so much money to do. We were really the first to start the uninsured mammograms.
So you've been on the asking side of grant making at large levels. Great. Who else?
I'll go next. I've just always been involved with nonprofits, being on their boards. And over the years, I've seen them struggle, and I've seen them, do very well. I guess about 3 or maybe it's 4 years ago, I was on the board. I've been on the board for Boys and Girls Club here. I'm not anymore, but we had our annual steak and burger dinner each year, and that particular year we made a bold move. We moved it to MTSU. We got the blessing of Dr. McPhee, and also I got a blessing to be able to provide the food, cook the burgers and all that, which Aramark had the contracts, and it was a big no-no, and we went through a song and dance to get that done, and we worked our fannies off, and we had Terry Bradshaw as our guest speaker that year, and we raised over $400,000 at the time. It was the largest raise that the city's ever, any organization in the city's ever gotten, only to be surpassed the next year by Charles Barkley. And so I was asked to attend a meeting, a state conference. They basically wanted to know more about how we did what we did. And as I sat in there and heard everyone speak, we were the only ones that raised our own money. Everyone else got grants from government grants and from a lot of them from their local municipalities. And I thought, well, why don't we get any more, from our city? And then so it's always piqued my interest as to why we hadn't, and then this opportunity arose itself, and so I thought I'd hopefully be able to get on this committee and learn more about how we can improve. The other thing is, over the years, each one of these organizations, when we'd have area-wide meetings, everyone said, well, Murfreesboro's got the best Red Cross, Murfreesboro's got the best Salvation Army, Murfreesboro's #1 Boys and Girls Club in the state of Tennessee, and just, we're looked upon by our peers, I can tell you guys, very, very admirably and strongly by the outlying cities, even Memphis and Knoxville and Chattanooga. I mean, we're on everybody's radar here in Murfreesboro for how well we do with our nonprofits.
My only experience was through the education I got from being on the council, where we talked about essential services, nonprofits, partnerships, and how we were going to evaluate that in terms of how the city was going to spend dollars and where those dollars are going to be invested and what that criteria would be for that process. And, how do we decide and when do we decide and how much is in the pool available to that? So that gave me a great education in that context.
You already had the skin in the game for these funds.
Correct.
And that involvement.
Right.
So helping to see that they're properly distributed and that that's kicked off is huge.
Well, and to know that part of the reason that we are here is because of the proceeds that were from the sale of the electric department and the discussion that sort of preceded this of where do we want that money to go, and can we shift some of that responsibility from the city to a different group, which is this group, right? It's the nexus of how this group got created, but where tax dollars and sales tax dollars are not being mingled with nonprofit stuff, where some people would give and some people would not give and would choose to do that way and choose not to spend that way. And it was messy, and the politics versus who asks and who gets granted and not, it was sort of, let's get some separation between that so that things are being evaluated based on needs of the community and what we get out of that versus who you know and all that sort of stuff. Which, we're going to be vulnerable to that here as well, but at least the elected officials, the elected body will not be as vulnerable to it. So,
I think for me, dealing with the nonprofits probably almost every day, I think since I've been here for 15 years now, there is a true transition between what when I first got here, you had mom and pop, what I call mom and pop nonprofits, and which worked probably really well in the 1970s, where you had one key person who just was, they were the driving force, but those people age out, and when they die, the ministry stops, or the outreach stops, and we saw that with Room at the End as a clear example of that. One person drove it, no one got in her way, and when she was gone, it was gone. And so clearly Murfreesboro and Rutherford County is making this huge transition to where we have to be, nonprofits have to be more organized than what they have been in the past. I'm the one who says on their, their board is very important. Who's on their board? Does the board rotate? That is to me very important. The other thing I see that's somewhat frustrating is duplicating what's already being done and already being done well, where an organization says, oh, I know what we need to do. We need to feed the homeless. Well, there are ministries that already feed the homeless, so we're having duplications, and thus resources are then spread even more thin than they need to be. So that's kind of some of the challenges I see every day, especially being downtown.
I bet. So when you see the duplication, and then there's a gap between the wraparound services that brings you from that need to the place that is more sustainable, and the gap is still there, and everybody is making assumptions about what the actual need was without really digging into the community-wide approach. You're seeing it firsthand through individuals.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Got it. What we want to do now is just kind of go through and discuss some of this. This is your opportunity to, through this process, to share with me and Garrett when we go back and go to work and get back in the founded sandbox, and are really making sure that it's reflective of the group. It's also your chance to interact with each other, so that a consensus in grant making on down the line is easier when you see this broad scope. Like you're going to be scoring individually, you're going to be opening up the software all by yourself, and you're going to be applying weight to the questions that are going to bring us to yeses and going to bring us to nos. This is the opportunity where you can make sure that we're answering the right questions and developing the scoring so that the scores are going to reflect the intention that we're trying to accomplish. So some of it we're going to, we're just talking broad concept, but we're going to, throughout the day, we're going to really dig in to some of those specific things where you can see how much weight, what's really important to you. So I just kind of want to go through each one, and like I can read through, but if there's something on here that's important that you want to expand on, something that you have questions about what other people read, let's just talk about it. So what do you hope to accomplish by serving on this committee? Provide funding for those charities in need, depends on outside funding. Serve my community for those for those not as fortunate as I. Give voice to those who live and work around the square. Homelessness and affordable housing is very real. Fair and honest and responsible use of public funds to enhance and improve the quality of life in Murfreesboro. And provide resources for nonprofits in need. Anybody want to kind of expand on that? Anything jump out? It's a well-spoken group.
Yeah.
All right. What problems do you want to solve in Murfreesboro? Food issues, mental health, secure homes, programs for children, shelter for families and pets, homelessness, needy children, recreational, and dependency on taxpayer resources in the city budget. A lot of problems in this community. And this is an opportunity to get started with those, and that opportunity will continue to grow. I'll say the problems will also continue to grow, so let's be solution-minded, right? What kind of jumps out? Like, where do you guys really want to, just for points of discussion?
Well, there's more initials by mental health. than anything else. And I think we've all seen that situation where a very obviously mentally ill person is in need. And the public service that we have for them these days is our local police department.
Let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah.
From the local police department standpoint, one of the things that I think has been super successful, and I keep hearing from everyone, from officers that I've known for years across the way, is the partnership that the city formed with Volunteer Behavioral Health to have co-responders. So if there is a person in a mental health crisis, before it was a police officer resolving and their hands are tied to how much they can do and how helpful that is, and in some cases how unhelpful having just the uniform on in the response can be. So now they've got a co-responder where someone who is a mental health counselor is partnered with an officer to respond to the crisis, and it has been really super. I don't know if anyone, Karen has worked with a lot from a funding standpoint. We funneled some of the ARPA funding to add to the success of that so they could cover more shifts. And it's been really, really positive. It obviously isn't solving all the mental health problems in the community. There's still some left to fund, for sure. But I think that immediate crisis piece, to have the capabilities to connect to resources, to, from an involuntary commitment piece, to have the right people in place, if it elevates to that point, what that looks like, I think has been really important.
I know there's one officer that responds. Have they added any more to that?
They have funding for 3. So Volunteer Behavioral Health has a grant for 1, and then we funded 2. So they have 3 licensed, trained behavioral health counselors that ride with the officers. And then in addition to that, a large majority of officers have gone through crisis intervention training as well, so it helps supplement that.
I think that's, kind of on that more immediate, more visible, more extreme crisis. I bet when some of you were writing this down, you might be thinking more of the impact that COVID had on school children.
That's exactly, it's, you have children, it's not just every other child is in mental health crisis. It is almost every child. I don't, and y'all may know this at a personal level, but it is, we have, I'll use an example. Fan is neck deep in Boy Scouts. We've got all these Eagle Scout boys. They're almost all out of school. They've all these boys who achieved at a great level. That probably shouldn't be on the thing, but there are children who have achieved at high levels that now are struggling. There are children, my children and their friends who are very fortunate are all, it's just across the board. It's everywhere. Kids falling out of school, that kind of thing. Anything that we can do to help the anxiety issues and life security issues, I think, is important.
Okay. Anything else about discussion along the lines of mental health that you kind of want to touch on?
Nothing other than we've seen it over and over again. There's no real big solution for this, but how one mentally challenged person can take a community down real fast. And all of a sudden you got TV cameras from every corners of the earth right here in Murfreesboro reporting about what happened.
Sure. So from a funding standpoint, you look at some of the school safety training programs, right? You look at workplace violence and some of those like individual solutions to the bigger problem. But coming back to mental health, like providing resources before the crisis, right? Like some more of the preventative pieces. It's a really good point.
But wouldn't mental health tie into homeless too?
It can, and does, for sure.
Absolutely.
It's not isolated to them, right? But it's a great point. Like there's certainly a lot of connections. Anything else along the lines of the problems? what a lot of grant makers do, United Way, for example, when they establish their bold goals, and they said, these are the things where we're going to focus our impact and focus our funding. It doesn't mean that other things aren't important, but it means we're looking to directly set these goals and directly fund things that are impacting those goals along the way, right? So if it is a animal rescue, for example, all right, it doesn't mean that we don't like animals, it means that does that fit any of these goals, right? Some agencies have specific criteria. Some, in our case, from a community impact, like that's what we're going to have you working through is putting up some of those boundaries, trying to identify. I think where we are as a community, I'll say this, there have been a lot of funding opportunities for nonprofits over the past 3 years, right? Large amounts of money that some of the recipients were not prepared to receive. What does that look like for this group? I think is coming in and making sure as a part of this application that you see that they have a plan to spend the money. Like you're not just throwing money at problems, you're throwing money at solutions, right?
Okay.
And also, we won't throw it. What other funds and resources are available for Murfreesboro nonprofits? So looking at, like, these funds aren't going to solve all of those problems, but how can we look at collective impact? How can you look, just like Dr. Hinkle was talking about, what else is going on? Not only from a problem side, but from a solution side. So church, fundraising events, both annual and new, government grants, Christy Houston Foundation, United Way, Community Foundation, Charity Circle, Jennings and Rebecca Jones Foundation, the Floyd Foundation, a lot of other local opportunities, as well as some bigger ones, like things like Coca-Cola grants and, some different national grants that they can access, some that are specific to a need. Like a lot of the nonprofits in Murfreesboro have grant writing consistencies, right? Organizations that they know that they're going to on a regular basis. Anything you guys wanted to discuss along that? I wanted to just throw that in just from an acknowledgement of not trying to be all things for all people. We're trying to really get focused. Any discussion along these lines?
So is that a criteria for us? Does this organization have other avenues for getting their required funds? Is that?
It's a good question. I mean, we'll ask for their financials, right? So we'll ask what, as a part of the grant application, show us your budget and, where your revenue is coming from, right?
Income
And
as long as expenses.
So we will ask how you want to weigh that is, what are your thoughts on it?
That's fairly important, yes, to have other avenues.
It's fair life. What applications do you, I'm sorry?
Pretty high,
Pretty high, right?
I would think.
What applications do you expect to see? Current local nonprofit organizations in Murfreesboro and Rutherford County nonprofits, newly established, lesser known, or less? Somebody correct me. Not sure what that says.
That's got to be mine.
Legacy.
That's got to be mine, right?
Legacy nonprofits. That's my fault. G's and S's are lots alike. It's fine.
Nothing about that handwriting is your fault.
Small group with a vision for filling a need. Groups that have gotten city funds in the past. Throw out, if you would, just some names that you know of organizations that you're going to be surprised if they don't apply, right? Boys and Girls Club, Journey Home. Just throw some out to the group.
Doris Pope.
Nourish.
Greenhouse.
Discovery Center.
United Way.
Habitat.
Life Hospice.
There's a lot. I haven't looked at the data in a while. More than 2 years ago, though, I was meeting with Megan Flippin from United Way. She showed me that in Rutherford County, there were 900 plus registered nonprofits. So that included churches, a lot of nonprofits that were not active.
That's
bigger
county?
ones, Rutherford County. It might be over 1,000 by now. Like, there's a lot of organizations that are here, that are out.
What's the child bus under?
City schools. Collier, do you know that?
It's the C schools.
Is it the foundation or the schools
It's the
themselves?
schools. But they get big grants. I mean, the person who runs that program is fantastic, and she gets big grants for it.
I think that sort of conversation would be really helpful as we're talking through this, because there's a lot of knowledge in the room from different areas of, what does Collier know from a legacy standpoint, institutional knowledge, where she served and where she's been. Same thing with John related to what he has talked about in serving the homeless, that, there will be the issue of do we or do we not add to what this other organization is doing, but then there's the other piece of us feeling comfortable sharing those things, and it doesn't necessarily mean you do or you don't, but I think that knowledge is very helpful to the process.
But I would think, if we're going to use the Chow Bus as an example, which is like a phenomenal and creative idea, they wouldn't apply if they didn't have the grant coming. I would hope. I would hope they wouldn't duplicate what they were already getting funds for.
But I think in an instance like that, what if, how long has that been in process?
I'd say 7 or 8 years.
So if it were to not be funded, what impact does that have to the community? You know what I mean?
Unbelievable.
Right. So, I think that, I don't know that, but you know that, and so I think that's important to the conversation as well, so.
If y'all know the Chow Bus,
No.
anybody, it's like old school buses. School buses, are legally limited on how long they can be on the roads. And so they have refit these school buses in order to serve anybody. Essentially, I thought it was supposed to be till they were 18 years old for food, but I think that you can go get food during the summers off these buses. And they also did the same thing with books. So and then I believe, and you're going to know that, and it got national recognition, but that the Rutherford County copied it. Is that right? Do you know? Okay.
It's interesting.
Lots of people copied it, but it,
Yes, the greatest form of flattery, right?
yeah, exactly.
Even during COVID, they got hit because I got a notification that they needed money. and
Right, the
how
Schools
much could we
Foundation
fundraise?
did send some money at that time, you're exactly right. But I think generally, that was.
Yeah, but
you're-
even the
You're exactly
impact
right,
of COVID,
yeah.
once again.
Also, we need to be very open-minded because there's some organizations that might either be misconceptions or we think they're doing one thing when actually they're providing these services that we didn't even realize.
It's a great point. Or if it is a program-specific application, we're not judging the organization as a whole alone. We're considering the specific thing that they're asking for. Like the Chow Bus, for example, if this part is funded and going well, and they have an idea and something that they're fundraising for a different arm of that, and then that's what comes in. Looking not just at the organization, but also at the specific program that they're asking for. Is that where you're going?
Yeah, well, Boys and Girls Club, great example. A lot of people have a misconception it's just an after-school babysitting service. And if you really knew what they did, it'd blow your mind. There's 5 or 6 major services they provide children.
Sure. Including, and their families, right? Sending them to-
Including,
not just-
on Friday afternoon, they pack a backpack for about, I don't know, at least 100 of those kids full of food, because that'll be the only food they get that weekend.
Good work.
Yeah.
What information from a nonprofit is important to you that's going to get you into a yes in your application? Broad outreach, how well managed they are? Is the mission to meet basic needs? Past results are positive? So that track record piece is important. Does this organization fill a need that cannot be fulfilled anywhere else? A functional board with rotation of members, agree, strong, competent leadership. I feel like this one is really big. I'm going to keep that one through the next things. If you have more to add, and we've got more paper, so we can keep going on, like we can get down to the scroll point on what kind of things are going to bring you all to yeses. What other comments do you have along these lines? What's important to you that we need to really highlight as a group?
The more people it serves, the better. And that, to me, meeting basic needs is very important.
General impact, what is it going to do? Like kids and, you know, I know there's a reading program that is trying to be funded and they've really done well. If you don't have kids that read, what's going to happen to the future, you know?
If this group recognizes that need with an organization and we can help prop it up to where it's very successful, and the years go by, this committee, as we rotate off and others come on, can continue to make that group more successful, then we've done it, you know, we've done our service. And we're laying the groundwork for that.
Just something I'm thinking about is when somebody said something about impact, it would be nice if we knew it was going to have an immediate impact too, instead of something long-term, just something that was going to.
You know, I guess our ultimate goal is, like in business, it's ROI. Our ratio is impact per dollar.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the end result of what our efforts will produce.
So with the impact, the immediate, and then the long-term?
With the results being visible, that they're able to show the results, we can see it.
Measurable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The visible results, and we're going to get this afternoon more into that concept of measurable, but give us kind of a teaser of what you're thinking along those lines now.
Well, I know in my work with Rotary, in the past, you know, we would give out grants, and then we would ask for the results, and they would look at you like you had, like, what do you mean results? You know, and so we're very, you know, we ask for a follow-up, quit, you know, year-round follow-up, tell us what you've done, why you've done it, can you document it, show it? And so we've had creative videos, pictures, you know, this is where your money went. So it definitely was hands-on,
Show me.
definitely visible.
Show me you did what you said you were going to do.
Absolutely.
And like I'm not judging you by my standards, I'm judging you by yours that you said in your application. You said you were going to serve 100 people. How many did you serve? Was it 100?
Right.
And, you know, and tell me why it's more or less, right? So we'll keep this one. Now let's talk about edits. They're not as fun. What things will lead you to an edit? Focus on small group, high operational expenses. Any programs that exclude. No track record. Capital for new. Help me.
Sticks and bricks.
Ronnie.
Sticks and bricks. Thank you. So capital for new sticks and bricks. Yeah. Speculative upstarts. Organizations with too high overhead required. Duplication of mission. Executive turnover multiple times in a short time frame. That's interesting. Not meeting basic needs or helping a large portion of the community. That's very well put. Any other discussion along that? The what is going to score low in your mind? I'm counting golf on the sidelines.
Yeah. Awkward answer.
Good, let's hear it.
An organization that's not somebody's job, like I think I'll raise money for new tables for the city, and that's going to be my job.
Right, and you're going to.
And that's exactly right. That's a good way I can earn a living. And wrap that up in a package that looks like a needy charity.
I'm going to keep the yes/no pages here throughout the day.
That's great.
Please keep adding to those. Do we want to go over our comments, questions, research now, or just keep those rolling? Let's do it. All right. Do you have questions? We'll see what the answers are. They might not come from me. Let's see. Can we prioritize our funding? Shortfall from past city gifts. Create a simple scoring system to take or eliminate applications. Expand on those questions. Let's not try to answer them as much as we try to really dig into why you ask.
Well, I know this last meeting, I know Craig had mentioned that it looks like there will be a shortfall from what was given in the past to nonprofits from the initial, our first year. I think he said that the city is talking about making up that loss. I just want to be, so that's, I still have that in the back of my mind.
There was a gap from the time that we had planned to be ready for this application originally in the setup by fiscal year to the next one. And City Council did vote just last week and approved that piece.
Perfect.
To fill that gap so that there won't be a longer gap between when they were able to ask last time to now. And now this is a different process, and they've all been coached for coming on 4 years now that the process is changing and it is becoming competitive, and that flat piece is no longer the expectation, and to prepare for that. But it will still be a thing, right, on an individual basis for sure.
And I take it we'll know that list right off the bat.
It's public welcome.
Well, I mean, I think we should know that. I mean, we would want to know the organizations that have been, in the history of what they've been getting, and now it's our baby, you know?
Yeah, we've been given that somewhere before.
We did that in one of the earlier meetings, but if you don't have it handy, we can revisit it at any point. But this process was set up to be a better process than that. So don't feel that you want, that your goal is to duplicate that process. Your goal is to elevate that process and to set the path, because the funding for these grants is growing from year to year, and the foundational process for what will begin as a pretty consistent money amount, like we're setting the foundation for much larger gifts in the future.
And we also said, pre-advised the nonprofits that just because they have been receiving city money in the past, that this is a new competitive process, so there's no guarantee that they will be funded through this new process, but it is a competitive process.
Can we prioritize our funding? I think the short answer is absolutely, and you'll be doing, like at a minimum, you'll be doing that prioritization in how you score, right? Like that's where the math part of priorities come in. Tell me more about the question. What do you think?
I wrote it.
Oh, I don't see it. I just got to see it. So I got excited.
I just was thinking back to when we created the Schools Foundation, how we narrowed it down in that we gave our funds towards science and math. Like, education is broad. Certainly what is needed in Murfreesboro is broad. Do we bring it back in as a way to prioritize?
Got it. Okay. Create a simple scoring system to...
And that's what our goal is number 3, is to score this, right?
Right, and so this afternoon we'll dig in a lot more of that. You'll see where the template is now, which will be the starting point for this afternoon's application. I mean, it's in good shape. It's better now than a lot of grant applications that are out there. You guys are gonna make it better. And you're gonna make it fit, so that whenever it is your turn to sit down and score, that you're really comfortable with what that means and what your task is as an individual and how it will interact with that group, hopefully. Thanks. This one next. Research requests. This is where I get homework. Years as a nonprofit, turnover at the executive level, number of clients served, are these services available elsewhere, current budget and expenditures, who else funds them? Tell me. Do they something in the positive? Do they make money?
Are they making money?
Oh, do they operate like the positive side of
Yes.
is it black or is it red?
Exactly.
Got it. Do they alienate a large group or not? Interesting. And board members. So this is more along the lines of how you guys answered that was more along the lines of like researching what those applications are. I'm going to start a second, and we'll keep that one going. I want to start a second one where I want you to be able to give me and Karen homework specifically. What kind of things, I really want you to go back to the resources. I mean, we spent 2 days, really 3 days in Atlanta digging in. We have more information available to us now. Google at our fingertips. A fine attorney at the ready. Like the things that you guys aren't comfortable with, that you want us to come back to you the next time we meet with the hard stuff. Let's get there also. These are great ones. Did anybody want to talk more about them? Okay. Comments. Because of this money, we have the opportunity to change the lives of many people in our community, and I am truly grateful to be on this committee serving people. I love that. Thanks. I'm super excited to help serve.
That's mine.
I'm just kidding. I don't think I wrote on that one.
For those in need and opportunities to improve our citizens' lives. Service and provide for those in need and opportunities to improve our citizens' lives. Wonderful. Do we lean more towards operational budgets of the requests or towards brick and mortar budgets and repair, or both, or does it matter? Good questions. Honored to be on this board, the initial and then the future funding. Awesome. Anything else you guys want to add, just along that same comment line of where we're going? It's great feedback. Tell me what y'all think. Y'all want to, we're going to watch a video here in a second. Before we do that, any kind of direction, general feedback on how we're spending our time?
I think it's helpful.
It's good.
Yeah, this is great. It's helpful.
Okay. If you don't like it, say so, we'll change.
Warning, you could soon lose your job because of what's happening
We had this pre-mix
inside
where you
this
didn't have to
building you
watch
see
the
behind
ad,
me.
but
Goldman Sachs.
look. Here we go.
Have a great day. Hi. What can I do for you today, sir?
Hi, my name is John. I appreciate what you do for this neighborhood. Your pizza is making a difference.
Well, thank you, John. You know, when we opened, we were just a small shop with a simple mission to...
Right. Listen, I represent a large institution, and we're interested in buying a significant number of your pizzas.
Oh, Okay, great. Well, our cheese pizzas are $10.
Great.
And then
I've done some number crunching and determined that we're going to need 10 per month, and I can pay $8 per pie. Oh, and I'll need them to be Sicilian.
Oh, but the Sicilian pies are more expensive. That won't cover my costs.
Oh, I'm sure you can just find someone who will be willing to make up the difference.
Who?
Well, maybe do a couple black tie events, honor some people.
I'm concerned about the impact on quality at that price. And, my reputation is at stake.
Of course, but just imagine how much more efficient you would be with 20% less than what you should be given. But I'm sure there's plenty of other pizza places around here. If it's too much work.
It's okay. You know what? I've got an oven that's been on the fritz, and maybe the steady business will help pay for repairs.
Oh, I would love to help with that, but 100% of what we give to you must be spent on ingredients, okay? We do not pay for overhead, okay? See, none of this money can be used for utilities, rent, marketing, pizza boxes, or your salary. Especially not your salary. No.
No pizza boxes? And how am I supposed to deliver them?
Oh, well, there's a place in Bushwick that is completely sustainable. They deliver your pizza using solar-powered drones on recycle bins.
I don't have those.
Okay. You can spend 5% on pizza boxes, 10% on dough, 5% on tomatoes, 10% on cheese, and the rest on spices. See, it's all spelled out here in this pizza-making plan.
I'm the one who knows how to make the pizzas.
Yeah, no, of course. What you want to do is just fill out this paperwork, okay? You make any of the stipulated adjustments to your business model, and then after a few site visits and several audits, payments should start rolling in about 6 to 9 months.
A site visit?
Yeah. As you see here on page 47, okay, your chef will either have to have been nominated for a James Beard Award, competed on Iron Chef, or taken anger management classes from Gordon Ramsay.
I serve pizzas. A James Beard Award, huh? Most of my cooks can't even grow a beard. Hi. Oh, hey. Where did that other guy go that was just here?
He got transferred to a different department. I'll be making the orders now.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. His expectations are a bit, unreasonable.
You're telling me. You saw.
I know, right? So I would like 4 dozen falafel sandwiches.
Oh, we don't make falafel sandwiches.
Well, that's what we need. And I also need you to track each and every one of your expenses on this ancient scroll. Use the feather pen. It has the blue ink. Nice to meet you. And really, you are making a difference with each falafel sandwich.
Yeah.
You don't have to put up with that. You and other pizza places are providing a valuable service to our community, and we should be backing you up and not making you jump through hoops. Listen, I would like to order a large supreme pizza, and someone told me that you have an oven on the fritz, so here is $100 to go towards fixing that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I hope you come back.
No, absolutely not. I only buy pizza from the same pizza place once, because otherwise I keep coming back, you get dependent on me, and that would be so.
Oh. Okay.
Give me your thoughts on pizza.
That was all for Wade Hayes' benefit, I think.
I was thinking how many times you get.
Tell me from your perspective on the ask side, those of you who have been there wanting a grant, what part of that do you want to bring to this process? What part of the looking at it from the applicant's viewpoint do you want to see in this process?
a lot of these nonprofits, the people heading them up are there to do the work. That's what they're good at. They take care of old people, they take care of young people, they have, whatever it is they're doing.
Yeah.
And then they're asked to throw a hat on and become a business person and try to play by a set of rules just to get some money. And that's not what they do. And I guess that was a good video.
Making it way too complicated for them to get the money. This
Right?
is going to get frustrating for them.
Karen and I questioned the data because like 70% of all statistics are made up on the spot, right? But what we were told in Atlanta was that what was reported by grant applicants across the nation on average, that a grant applicant would spend 20 hours on the application and 40 hours on the report for each funding source. Rough data, right? Like maybe, I think an organization that has a grant writer, has an experienced person who already has a file folder like Karen's, where all of the information is there in the file, and here's our proof of nonprofit status, and here is the narrative I wrote that I'm going to customize for something else that I'm going to customize just for this one and plug it in. But still, it is hard from the applicant standpoint, and you don't want to take them away from their mission for too long while they participate in this process, right?
And a lot of them, nonprofits, are small and cannot afford a grant writer. They're expensive, and they're hard to find. So even with things like a Live Hospice, who's multi-million-dollar, they have one, and they just got them.
What other personal experience do you have from the ask side? That you want to share with the group? I'll do one. My first application as Greenway coordinator. I'm going to name names. It was the Tennessee Arts Foundation. I asked for less than $2,000 to do a music program to pay the band. They funded half, and I had to make 3 trips to Nashville, including defending in front of the board, for less than $1,000.
Wow.
It was a good learning experience for me, right? The next grants that I've started applying for were much larger. The next one that I did was, I think it was $150,000, and then I did a $300,000. Like at that level, 3 trips to Nashville and is worth it, right? Of course, more and more is online now. There's no trips to Nashville, but there is still that time commitment that is taking me away from all of the different things that I felt like I ought to be doing, right?
With that said, I would think the size of the ask would be a different scoring number, possibly. I mean, if you're asking for $1 million, that's a lot. That's a 40-hour or 50-hour or whatever. If you're asking for $1,000 or $2,000, it shouldn't be super complicated.
That's a great point. So for this first year give, we're not going to be giving $1 million, right? So we're going to make it clear to not ask, because you need to be asking someone else, because we're not operating that level. But we're setting a process where at some point down the line, as this trust builds, the ask is going to be bigger, and there can be, I believe Christy Houston has a more extensive, and many other organizations, if it is under a set amount of money, then here is your application, and if it is a larger, here is your much more complicated application, because your ask is much bigger, for sure.
I think it's important that we as a committee not set up hidden traps. And what I mean by that is that where we know what we're looking for, but we're not clear in that for those who are applying. And an example for that for me was I was with a group that we applied for a grant where the director of the foundation had written a book. He says it very clear in the application. I wrote a book about the very process and about the mission of this group. And if you didn't quote from his book, you didn't get the grant. Fortunately, we had someone on our committee said he's mentioned it twice. We better read the book and quote from it in our application. And I was grateful we got the grant. I was very disappointed when I found out other groups that I knew of failed to get the grant, and none of them quoted from the book. So I just assumed that was his hidden trap. Do you care? I've written a book. I want to see if you recognize that I read the book. And so I thought that was very unfair. And I don't want to do that to our community.
Right, and so like a more transparent process, we want that scoring rubric to be explained on the front side.
Right.
Of this is what we're looking for. Don't spend a lot of time asking for something that is outside of our boundaries anyway.
I know that we went over this, that they would know when the funds would be given, dispersed to them. But my problem was when asking for stuff for a grant, and you got it, and they would tell you, and then you wait, and you're kind of depending, you're, waiting for that, for your growth and for your agency to keep going, and they're in that lag time. And the bigger they are, the more lag you get, it seems.
What else from the group? Let's take a break. Stretch your legs. We'll check and see what time lunch is arriving. And get around with it.
Doing great.
Thanks.
Okay. Okay.
Angela.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you think that does anybody listening to this? I mean, it's available. No, we can't redact anything out.
Okay, nobody's gonna hear it. There's no chance anybody's listening.
It's highly unlikely.
I just feel horrible.
If there's
that my ground.
it is.
No. Okay. I'm just sitting there like, oh my gosh, I just threw those boys under the bus.
I highly doubt that.
Okay, I just needed some light back. To make sure.
Yeah, I bet you're fine. I don't know if this is the hard hitting event of the day.
The city,
I need that.
and I put some asterisks there, and asterisk says it's really not in the funding base that we would consider like
You don't get one on the microphone.
library. That's
I
not
bet you're going to be fine.
something that's a
They'll
nonprofit,
never
that's
know.
just out of
I
that,
mean,
that particular.
But is this is up in the what time?
23.
Okay.
And it made the news, do you really?
I've got that in my book. I've slept.
Okay.
I don't think we've read it. I'm interested though, because I haven't.
Yeah, there was a couple surprises in there to me.
$1 for
Rutherford County. Lease.
Well, the lease is, and I'm aware of this cost too, but the lease is the city provides them physical facilities.
Gotcha. Oh, okay, in kind almost.
Yes, it's very much in kind, yes.
Because I want somebody to go, I heard.
You're surprised.
How little number 2 and 3 got here, which are really are, are Jesus 101 kind of charities in Murfreesboro. And
How much they got
well,
comparatively.
yeah.
Plus
but wait,
Are you guys ready for lunch now?
All three.
It's here and ready.
Wait, what they
Been hungry?
do almost took over the.
Is that ready? Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it.
It's really
You almost ought to be part of police payroll.
Exactly, I was going to say, that ought to be funded by the police department. Got that. The surprise I was going to share with you is how high, quite frankly, this line was.
Yeah.
I mean, it works with kids and it's a good group, but grassroots of
And
people in desperation.
look at that. And when you and I were growing up, and when we were in college, and when we were having kids, that was super important. But nowadays, with iPads and laptops, and your ability to not go down to the.
Chocolate that would argue with you, but
I'm just saying, look at
we designed a wing for the post office
$1.2
out
million
at Hopkins
bucks.
School, and there's no books out there. It's all electronic.
Okay.
There's a bunch of computer stations. If you want to read a book, you sit down and call up your book.
Gotcha. But $1.2 million for 1 year. Yes, that's $100,000 a month. Compared to, that's over 50% of this whole entire paper.
Yes.
Going to something that's becoming obsolete, so to speak.
Yes, it really is, I guess. Yeah, I can remember that, my mom would load all of us up each week.
Oh,
and
man,
we'd go
yeah.
down there and go down to the basement where
Yeah.
got older, if you had a paper to write on Thomas Jefferson, you went to the library, got the encyclopedia and carried it with a handful of nickels, remember, and run the copy and...
Absolutely.
And then your
Yeah.
all the paper, the teacher would get the papers, they'd all look alike.
Yeah. God, I forgot about that. Microfilm.
Yes.
That type of thing.
Yeah.
Or just plain old copies, yeah.
Yeah, or like I say, just a whole section, a whole bookshelf of a dozen different encyclopedias.
And those days we call it Xerox.
Yes, that's right. We'd
Make me a Xerox of that.
I'd take 3 pages.
Remember that?
Yeah. You make 3, it was pretty magical. It
One
just
kind of
copied
copy
it.
machine.
Yeah, and you feed your nickels in and get 3 pages, and you go home and write your report, which would look a lot like those 3 pages. That's funny.
All right. Sit in and.
Yeah, the technology. Buggy whip.
Yeah.
On the way up the buggy whip.
Right.
Remember that?
I didn't know what you were doing.
The update to that schedule.
Aha!
This was yesterday.
It's actually on the Murfreesboro, the website.
Yes.
It's the first item from the August
For
17th.
Sally, I had to reply to all these national things.
It's just, this is actually what they presented
And I
at the
told
end.
Helen to go through just the local, but so we're not using nearly as many local, but it's kind of the same thing. Like,
Distributed to.
I can imagine these grant writers spending all this time trying to get these big national level grants.
This is their FY '24.
It got
So it's
colder.
going to differ.
So where's she looking?
She hasn't decided. She's going to go all Presbyterian in a week or two and go to Center Presbyterian.
Okay. Yeah.
That she's going to spend the night with a tennis player and meet with the coach and play and stuff. But I think her favorite's Washington and Lee. But she says she wished they were a little dumber and a little worse than tennis.
I'll get it.
So, Wake Forest is her favorite non.
Oh,
Helen.
oh, do she love Wake Forest?
I do.
So one of my kids in camp is the athletic director at Wake. So
Really?
John Curry.
Why don't you get young Fant Smith to go work on that?
Well, I think I said that to young Fant. I know that I said that to old Fant.
What is young Fant doing?
He is a senior and he wants to go work in athletic, like event planning.
But if I can reach out to, if Fant's interested, just let it, I can reach out to John.
I'm gonna just tell him right now.
What does he do?
He said he did.
What was he there when Pearson was there? Pearson graduated in 16.
No, so John was the AD at the University of Tennessee when Fat Phil Fulmer decided he knew better how to run the athletic department and got rid of John. John was a Wake
After
graduate.
meeting follow-up.
So that's how he ended up back at Wake.
My kid, Pearson loved Wake Forest.
Yeah, it's a great school.
And Will, our husband went there.
You can send it to them even as a group. I usually,
I think that
I try to, when I have to send to committee
Yeah.
basketball,
Yeah.
Wake Forest.
just to avoid.
Now, we're still at Wofford. Hey, you going to
I
talk
would
to
do
Will?
that. That is, because it's the reply all that is.
It was not for us.
I'm talking about,
So I usually just do a Macy's.
Oh, okay.
I'm not talking about Helen. I'm talking about Fant.
Yes.
Because
Maybe, yes.
Will is the assistant basketball coach. And
Yes.
they are always
And with that, you can just,
looking and moving and,
That's trivia, it's all the connections.
Yes.
Atlanta.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm putting it here too. Thank you.
he's climbing the ladder.
Yeah.
Look, we have a video on lunch, a slide on lunch.
Oh, how nice.
Coaching.
Find it.
What, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Yes,
every person is helpful. Thank you.
Yeah,
I think she's
yeah.
doing.
Hey, Maybe. We'll go do that.
Let me get priorities and then catch me.
Yeah, Fant worked at Ole Miss this summer, and last year he worked at Vanderbilt. So,
What'd he do?
athletic events in the athletic department. So that's what he wants to do. And his girlfriend just got into vet school, so that's very exciting.
Yeah.
Just got into,
No, at Lincoln
I got to
Memorial.
move. Sorry.
She is
Sorry.
roommates with Mamie.
Yeah, okay.
But it's a Masters of Science thing, which was kind of waiting to get into vet school.
Okay.
So she got it.
Is she going to vet school?
She's gonna go in after Christmas. Memorial.
Then that way, any
That's a
people can have,
beautiful
can
campus.
pop.
You know Lincoln Memorial?
Is it in Knoxville?
It's
North in the,
it's like on the edge. I think that the vet school is actually in Virginia, but it's like in the edge of Tennessee, Virginia, Kentucky.
I knew it was up east.
Yeah.
Tennessee.
Laurel Tips.
So it's a vet school?
Yeah, apparently it's super hard to get in vet school.
Yeah, because there's not many of them.
Right, and I'm like, nobody cares
Auburn
about
has a
where
big
their
one.
vet went to school.
A really good one.
yeah.
It's like 10% of applicants get it.
It's like doctors who study in Argentina, no one asks where you went to school. I don't know where Jordan went to school.
You do?
I don't.
I did.
I just
He
trust
went
him.
to the Philippines.
That's right. He went to Granada. Yeah.
No, he didn't.
No, but you know, I mean.
Usually by their specialty, you can kind of tell.
Well, it was interesting.
Right.
Aruna went to school.
All in the
Aruna Shaw?
grant passing side, and the grant giving side.
She's an
Kristen
MD.
Houston.
I don't,
Yeah.
she's like, she may have taken Pat Spangler's place at the.
But she's an internist or a family
Right,
practice.
right.
When you get up into the big
Right.
specialties, you really see.
The international.
I mean, you'll see neurosurgeons.
I was on the board for 3 terms, actually.
Okay.
So,
you
that's
have
an
been
interesting
on that side of the table.
Yeah,
Let
it's
you meet.
okay.
No,
Well,
fascinating.
Tina's daddy, who and she, he came to go
difference.
back.
Yes.
They repeat all of that because they are
You run into,
so governed.
like one of the agencies is the legal society.
Vance girlfriend did get
Provides
some
legal
really good, but she's.
yeah, help for folks who can't.
You would be kind of limited on some of your animals, I think.
The United Way
They might give
is
them the food chain.
you give it away, but you also go and do your campaign, you organize campaigns at all the
The
different.
microphones are still on.
Yeah,
and stuff like that.
Yes, yes.
And
I've
then
been to many of those.
Who are we gonna talk ugly about?
And then they also try to get private money.
Yeah.
He went to undergrad Hopkins.
None of the attorneys in town will
Get
give
my son a job.
because of
And then usually you get,
won't do it.
do what?
There's a
The mics are still live.
solidarity, and this was back in the day.
Get my son a job.
Anybody out there listening?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They've already told me
couldn't, I
nobody's
mean,
gonna
it's
do
like-
anything. So there.
I know, but
They're very upset that United Way would take that on as an agency.
Wow.
I was
Sense that would mean that
Don't know.
I would actually be benefited.
This man. Yeah.
Interesting.
And things may have changed now with TV attorneys and all that. The new, the new lawsuits that we didn't have back then.
Oh, yes.
well, that's wonderful. And this is National Day. Don't, I'll say don't, I take y'all.
Well, everything.
Okay. Multiple locations now, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and you know they have
Yeah, I own tubes. So my position is, used to be mopping floors and
Yes.
emptying trash cans. Now it's, sure we're paying our bills.
Make sure you're paying the bill.
what it could be used, why they.
Which is impossible.
Do you have a general manager? Otherwise, you would never sleep, right?
Yeah, we got, our management team, we got 36 people.
Okay.
And then my son is the director of operations.
I see. Okay. I just wasn't aware. I'm sorry.
No, no.
And so you started at the bottom with that and started in the ropes
Right.
as you went.
Yep.
Gives you a unique insight as you work your way up.
It sure does.
I started with an architecture firm 40 and a half years ago. And when I got there, the first thing they said is, okay, your office will be back here. You'll need to put in a wall here and, and build it and paint it. And so I went from
Where'd you go to school?
Nailings to UT. How about yourself?
I went to Memphis.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I saw.
40 years ago in architecture school, they pretty much grabbed any year that
I mean, I think the farms.
UT engineering, he was an exceptional kid.
He's actually on Greater Impact. Dude.
Oh, wow.
He's a biomedical engineer.
Oh, yes. Both of my kids went to school on the 7-year plan.
Yeah.
And got graduate degrees.
He's back in what was
Dinner engineering is getting more and more where, yeah.
I mean, this is fantastic.
That's very, very helpful.
So what's Helen?
40 years
When is
ago.
Helen gonna go?
Well, she's gonna.
She's a junior engineer.
She's a senior.
Firm is local.
Well, she's already
Johnson
been.
and Bailey Architects. And we were in the city center.
Want to play tennis or just go?
Let's see.
Yeah, she can play like.
Like I said, I started down there and became one of the partners.
Okay.
I got to be vice president, which means you do all the work and someone else makes the money. So I got position of vice president.
You get all the profit.
If she goes.
Project's good.
The president wasn't there much.
So city center in downtown Nashville.
There.
Here, oh, okay,
Yeah,
gotcha.
we're on the 7th floor of the city center.
You guys designed all these buildings and the schools and all that,
We
right?
do a lot of schools. We did all the city schools, but we don't do county work. Haven't done any county work.
Are you still with South Bailey?
Part-time, I don't work much.
Yeah.
I'm designing a playground for Mitchell Nelson School that goes out for this year in a week. And so I've gone from doing, 3 or 4 $1 million schools at a time to a playground and renovations and things.
You know, I'm too late.
And I sold mine for which was the big thing.
Semi-retired.
I call it retired.
Retired.
Because I love what I do,
Yeah.
so I enjoy working 8 to 10 hours a week.
Doing playgrounds and things.
Yeah, doing playgrounds and things. So, yeah, I went from 16 hours a week to 8
Here's a
hours a
cake.
week. That's hard, right?
I always wanted to be an architect is what I wanted to do.
I love doing the work, I always have. I just didn't enjoy doing it 60, 80 hours.
I wasn't smart enough. Oh, I just didn't have that. I wasn't good at math, but where I fell in love with it was, and they don't do this anymore, but when we were in high school, we had shop class.
Yes,
the drafting.
it's drafting. That's where I started.
Fell in love with
I did.
graph paper and design stuff. And,
I like to learn.
So,
And then for SMU.
that's what I wanted to do, and then I just couldn't get the math, and the geometry, and
Yes.
trig, and all that.
Yeah.
They're very cute.
Well, it's a shame they do this.
Oh, they do.
Throw freshman
Applying to the
architects into
Johnson or
physics.
TCU.
And it weeds out about half of them. It's kind of a waste because once you become an architect, you have
So does their medical center.
And are they largest?
I
According to Helen.
think so.
Well, they almost need to be, there's nothing to do.
And say, I've
Well, that's why Wake Forest is so Greek heavy because.
All right, if y'all want to fix a plate,
Where you going on the weekends?
This is unbelievable. Y'all eat like this all the time?
Oh, every day. It's just taxpayer dollars at work,
I mean,
right?
wow.
Good, here's something first.
There you go.
Here at the airport.
Yeah, dig in.
I'm gonna follow Colin.
Ronnie, you missed that. Council.
Oh, they come see us?
Just one store and
Yeah.
now like 4 or 3.
My partner was Jim Demas. And,
I do
Two
miss
is
the
actually
opportunity to, there are certain.
on Broad Street is 5 years older than Demas's. We opened Toots in '85 and Demas's in '90.
I see.
And at the time, Mr. Demas owned all the
Western Sizzle in South Middle Tennessee.
Okay.
And then he sold them, and then came to Murfreesboro, and then we did Demas's. And then so, there for the longest, it was just those 2 restaurants.
Yeah.
I think, and then they went on to more Demas's, and then I bought the company.
All the meetings were set.
You talk about Lou, went on to do more too.
Are you involved in these?
No, not anymore.
So,
Was up until 2005.
the ninth,
Seems like yesterday, but it's almost been 20
October
years.
17th is a Tuesday.
Monday the 9th.
I get it. Well, actually, I didn't think it was, but in retrospect, it was a great day.
Okay.
I'd like to just train you separate from the group. Yeah,
Do y'all want, I was saying, do y'all want to come to mine?
But not.
Yeah,
I was at Mid-South.
You done sooner.
Yep.
Let me make sure
You-
Chad's got a smart bag on.
So, I've got,
Get a new coffee pot. Mine blew up this morning.
Pinnacle has roughly $1 billion.
Chad, are we good to go again?
That's not true. Probably a $500 million loan book in Murfreesboro. Yep. 0% past dues.
That's what
I mean, she's really good, and that's what hurts a bank is,
Next, right?
one, loan losses, and then two, if you get like B or some of those other places. that have
Angela.
Deposits, you lose your liquidity where people are
The
sucking.
very first thing I have a question about, is there another status
Usually, it's
that
portfolio
one,
losses,
a
loan losses.
nonprofit would have, other than a 501c3?
Is there across the board
Past dues, solid.
Yes, there are.
It's just Virginia, all that hold this stuff.
No issues, man. That's awesome. Yeah, that's, now, it's one of those things, we're not going to win.
The country club
With all the
has
stuff we're hearing,
one.
how can everybody do it? So,
Well,
but we think there's been so much liquidity
schools,
and so many people's a commercial.
Nine, but I don't know what
A lot of real
the
estate.
different,
We
like.
banked a lot of business.
those are tax designations,
So
really?
operating accounts, savings, liquidity cushion is all packed in.
Nonprofit without being a 501c3.
That's what-
I mean, it's been super strong.
That's what I think that there are things that are nonprofits that are not
and the tax exempt are two
501c3.
different things. We use them interchangeably, but they really are.
Like a school or a church,
501c3 to be
they're
tax
nonprofits,
exempt.
right?
Because they give you a
We're
number.
going to give to,
That's not completely true.
I mean, so
501c3 is a specific type of nonprofit entity. You don't have to be 501c3 to be tax exempt. For example, we are a government entity, and the trust is a government entity that is applying for both a 501c status and a Section 115 status. Section 115 is a government tax exemption status. So to be tax exempt and to be nonprofit, you're talking two separate items there, and we tend to use them interchangeably, but the 501c3 tends to be the most recognized organization type status, but there's different types and different organizations that are set up, and it depends on the type of organization on which 501c designation they get. But that 501c designation is a nonprofit. It does vary depending on which type of organization they are, on which 501c they actually get.
so right off the bat, we would maybe want to remove the 3?
Well, I think what we would need to get into would be kind of what that charitable status and how it relates back to the charter and to the regulations set forth in when the trust was established on what type of organizations those would be funded to. So I know that a 501c3 is covered. If we want to go a little bit broader than that, then we would need to make sure that it aligns with how the trust is established and within those legal guidelines for distributing money to those other designations.
Yeah, okay.
So I added that to our research to do, so that we can, like, if the group is interested in expanding beyond C3, what that would be and how we would, first of all, if that is a possibility. So we'll follow up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so just a quick overview. This is, definitely a draft to kind of get us started. And I think based on some of the information that you have provided, I think we've done a fairly good job in providing some basic questions to ask. And just to help kind of orientate yourself to the application, it's kind of broken down into sections. So there's the eligibility section. And the question about does your organization provide faith-based services? If they say yes, it triggers this next statement that they have to be aware of. So that as a government entity, we can't say no to a faith-based organization, but we can say no if they're using that money for faith-based specific type activities, which are outlined in that larger paragraph. So that's why that statement is there as part of that. So to make sure that they understand, if they're a faith-based organization and they're providing a program or service that's open to anybody, there's no stipulations, that's fine. But if there's certain, religious participation stipulations or things along that line, then it makes a difference. So that's the eligibility portion. The next major category is general information. So that's just trying to get a little bit of background information about the organization. And then the program project design gets into questions specifically about what they're wanting to do and with funding areas. And then the leadership and governance section asks questions around leadership and board. So we just want to make sure, are we asking the right questions based on some of your comments? That was really a heavy part of getting to yes for some of you was around the organization's leadership and their governance. So, we just want to make sure that we're asking the questions that will give you the answers you need for that. The other section is goals and outcomes. So that was kind of leads to the measurements and the impact conversation that we had earlier. And again, so identifying the appropriate questions within that section. And then attachments are what information that we're requesting them to submit. So right now, a copy of their IRS letter, current operating budget, most recent audited financials. And embedded in the leadership and governance, we do ask for a board list as well as an org chart in that section as well. So there's a couple of additional attachments that are embedded with the question. The end where there's the big X is through, just disregard that. Those are sample questions that are just part of the template, the sample template. So those don't necessarily, we can use them. So if you see one that you really like and would prefer that we ask it, we can certainly include it in that section.
Great. So we are about to grab the Sharpies again. For your comments, basically each of the questions has a page over here. That's whatever you write is going to be out of discussion. So whatever you want to say, like kind of following a lot of that same format that we did this morning. But we're going to really zone in on the specifics now. So I want you to use this to, you can bring your page over there to really think about what we have in the template. What do you want us to talk about, and we'll go through it question by question, or whatever you guys need. Any comments to kind of kick us off as we head over to the Sharpies?
So I've never filled one of these out, but, everything, I tend to think in terms of things as, hey, how long is this going to take, right? And so we've talked a little bit about that. Is the process going to be cumbersome? Is it going to be easy? How much are we going to ask? because I don't have experience doing this, I just don't know the answer. Are there ever stages of application processes, meaning, because if I were to fill this out and I'm looking at the character count, I'm thinking, oh, this looks like a nightmare. That's the first thing I would say. And then I would say, who's going to help me do this? Because I don't want to do this. But is there a process where there's an application that's half this and then we make a decision based on that? And then there's a longer application if you make that cut and we go through it? Or is that too much, or am I asking a dumb question?
That's a great question. No, it's a great question, and it's very doable. Within this software package, we can do a letter of interest portion, so we can narrow that down into a few key questions if you wanted to that. So that's kind of like a pre-application. There are a lot of foundations that do that as a weeding out process to, really identify to make sure that the project is in alignment with what they fund, and so that an applicant isn't wasting your time. So that's something that we certainly can look at and we can do if that's the desire of the group.
I'm going to add a page for letter of interest for you guys to comment and for us to discuss on that. And then we'll also have to research that as far as how the trust documents, if the trust documents allow us to do that first stage. But it's a great point, it's kind to the people that are not going to get funded to tell them earlier.
And I'm being selfish, just full transparency, because I don't want to look at every one of those that we're not going to do, right? To spend the time that we would spend, because we could spend a whole lot of time doing this, and of course that's selfish on my part, but it's honest confession.
That's a good.
But I would think some of the questions there would have to be kickers, right? That would kick them out. I mean, so.
Am I eligible?
Yeah, am I eligible, or, yeah, so the questions would, I think, would have to be very specific, that when they answer, we know they're not eligible.
So I'm more thinking, and again, it just hit me right where I need to be hit, but I'm thinking project name, do I really need to know that? I probably don't care. Start date and end date, I probably don't care. And there's probably some things like that I could go through and say, do we care about the focus area, the service area, the budget? I think it's a great question of if it's partially funded, does it impact? I mean, I think that's smart, kind of stuff. But trying to streamline that, and I know that's what we're doing. I'm not trying to get ahead of you. I'm just wondering, is there multiple levels that we could go through so that, because, if you get 50 or 75 applications, I'm sure I'll be at every meeting, but some of these folks will be spending a lot of time on that. I might not be here.
Much of that, when we get into your software training, that won't be done, that'll be done individually.
Okay.
But we will already have things sorted for you, but you'll be logging in on your own time to do your individual scoring and cranking it out.
Okay, got it.
So yes, making that less cumbersome will make you do a better job as you're scoring, for sure. Because if there's 100 there, by the time you're in your late 80s, you're not paying as much attention as when you started, even if you're blocking it off for a period of time, right? So to be fair to the applicants, being deliberate. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so in the initial trust document, it has the percentages that can be used in certain areas. I mean, that needs to be somehow taken into consideration. I mean, is that just in the end, do we take that into consideration, or?
Yeah, so that's gonna be a calculation at the end.
Okay.
So what it amounts to is, say you have 10 organizations and they're all in that one category, then you have to make sure that 25% of the total funding isn't exceeded in that one category. So that might mean that you take those 10 and you have to prioritize and take the top 5 or whatever.
And you guys would probably do that for us. Hey, this is in the 10% category, so these are the applications that came in that 10% bucket.
We can, yes.
I mean,
We'll help with the math and the process, and then so that the decision-making piece comes back to your score. Absolutely.
Well, then, under general information, one of the very first questions should be what category, and we should list these categories that.
Yeah, and that
There we go.
question is actually in the program design section of the questions. So, definitely we can make a note and say if your preference is to have that at the very top,
There we go.
then we can definitely move that question around.
But my understanding in reading this.
You're already ahead of us, thank you.
But my understanding in reading this is that those categories have limitations. That does not mean that you can't give to areas that don't fall in those categories, right?
When you go to your trust document, it doesn't line up to 100, correct?
Right.
Say no more than 25% to any one organization.
Yeah.
And each one of those isn't going to bring you up to 100, but it's going to give you some flexibility.
Right, so they don't have to categorize themselves, is what I'm saying, because they wouldn't all be in
She
that.
put an other category down here
Right, okay,
on page 3.
yeah.
And then let's see, the sum of education and youth services, community, and health-related is 45%.
You guys are welcome to dig in more if you want to move over and start getting some of those things down for us to circle back to and discuss. We can, it's up to you. If you need some more time with this document, you're welcome.
So we're listing over there, what specifically are we doing with Sharpies?
Over there on the pages is each question listed, basically. There's a page for eligibility, there's a page for governance.
Oh, and we're to make comments.
So that when we come back together, we're going to take it question by question.
Got it.
So kind of like, what's important to you for, kind of eligibility criteria, if there is any, other than what's stipulated through the trust documents? What's important for you for governance and leadership? What questions you want to make sure are on the application?
Let me ask y'all this.
Or if it's not important.
I wonder if because I'm looking at this focus area and Ronnie was saying like, I don't know about the, and I don't preach it. Because there's a lot of things I have no idea.
Sure.
Like we all do. But I wonder on these focus areas, I don't know
Second harvest season, I would want to serve our people. So
I wonder every, all seven of us, certain areas of their expertise.
Right.
Like Colliers education.
They help greenhouse, they help.
Right, I don't know if
Those
to make it.
applications. We did all.
So they'll need to take
I think what Craig said is that they need to serve here. I don't think he ever said that.
What would the money be?
That's interesting.
Because the healthcare expense is so high.
Yeah.
And you don't even really know what you're buying or getting.
Right?
You don't know, like they could say, you really know the difference of helping in and all.
Right.
Did I do one for focus area?
So do you see what I mean? Wonder if you became like that project manager on that.
Yeah. And that
Like
might,
financials, I'm looking for what's in here, dealing with financials.
financials was, I think, the one on the very last page.
Yes, it's actually in the attachment.
This is going to be really helpful.
This is current operating budget,
Vaccine rate.
and most recent audited financials.
So,
Kind of narrows your focus down.
right.
Suggestions for this,
So,
current
I
operating
think,
budget.
because after this, we're going to talk about kind of the evaluation process, so that would be
It's
a
kind of
really
like subcommittee.
yeah.
Right now,
And everything has a little bit of subcommittee.
Right, yeah, that would be a good
Instead of just
conversation.
getting falling out there in the wilderness.
Right.
And as far as you get a budget, that tells you everything.
Should we be more specific and say operating
If
budget?
you bring your page here,
Connected
that's
staff.
under the project
So-
scope.
I know we could break it down, but it'd be a whole lot easier if they.
Okay, yes.
So we're supposed to have
The salaries.
writing without having the sheet.
This is going to be fun.
Physical plant,
I mean, it was for their.
And that answers that question. But if it's for the arts and crafts program that anyone may attend.
Or they do concerts that, but this was for their.
Yeah.
But I do think subcommittees would be easy.
Yeah.
no.
Okay, so you want us to look at this and say what we add or take away?
Or
we want to discuss.
And maybe it's,
So you can be as specific
like after everybody, weighs in, then as we come back to the group, then you can provide your explanation. Questions on that.
We're going to use these together, discussion notes.
Yeah.
And my husband's position.
Yeah. And I think in the review process, we can share. So like, if you make particular comments within an application, like the other people can see that. So, yeah, that's a good thought.
Okay. So they're gonna call my nails are blue.
So these are all.
Oh, is that turnover?
These are done, yeah, so these are all related to the
that turnover?
Yeah, you can fix it.
No, I'm big on
Just
that.
kind of general questions.
Because I think that Christine Holmes that's what I think. Like, I'm putting it.
The leadership has to turn over.
Right.
And also how often is it, like it's both ways.
Yeah, so one of the questions on the application is, do you have a succession plan? So it's just a yes or no question, but, that's a good indicator of, have they set themselves up
Right.
to identify how they'll make that transition when it happens?
Where is this piece of paper? Program or project design?
That would be project scope.
Did I skip it?
No, I think
No,
you
I just
just,
did
we've got more paper.
That's enough.
Scope, okay.
Okay, start the fire.
See if it warmed up.
I must stick my hand in it.
There you go.
You'll be wearing a sweater next week.
Oh my gosh. It's the winter in here.
Yes, ma'am.
You are L1. L1.
What?
The trust guidelines.
RLL.
Is it allowed?
LL2, because I thought you were LL1.
I can't see. My eyeballs are broken.
Can education yet, or give me a category to
I
make it
think it
something.
was 25%.
I know if they're going to ask for money.
The general welfare.
They have to give you money.
Let's just keep it Murfreesboro.
Charity Circle gives $20,000. So
You go to the page at the top of the percentages, because I do remember.
It's over, that's just what it is. Because like I say, it mentions already in this information, the budget,
It's over what time? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's,
that's a team group.
I remember the intention
But yeah, the income sources, I think,
piece. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, per service, like, line, I think it was,
here you go.
And that's not an uncommon question.
20% education in year 15, and wait, let me back up. No more than 20,
So no more than 25 to any individual. And then not more than to the following.
Education and Youth Services, Community Safety and Victim Services, and Health-related services. And those total up to 45% in those three areas.
I think staff or Craig made the recommendation on the percentages at one particular point in time, but from a council level discussion, it was about, one, not wanting a large lump sum to eliminate the bucket arbitrarily because of some passion or need or want. But it was also, I think, to make sure those specific things were addressed so that they were talked about, so they were paying attention to school and health and services, because that's why they were named. The percentages per se, I think, were, hey, consider up to this and what that number looks like, but to cover some of the stuff that was in the existing budget to make sure that those things weren't summarily missed or, just overlooked, if you will.
Also to make sure that we didn't get like a MTSU foundation coming in and applying and having a committee coming in that was passionate about MTSU and saying, let's give 80% to MTSU.
Probably it could be 10 to 20 depending on
the building fund.
That wipes it out.
And they get all of it and that leaves nothing.
Yeah, and part of this too, I think,
Again, it's
and necessary
dependent upon
to be as involved as they are, because
a lot of that information is
2 or 3 iterations of
that is asked
exactly
of many applications.
Yes.
So if there's an organization
that will look and how it could sway to one direction of, hey, this is the only thing that matters, right? So we're talking about mental health. Easy to say, let's pour all our dollars into mental health and say, rather than doing a little bit for lots of things and seeing no meaningful impact, let's make a huge impact. It'd be easy to sell, easy to sway as you're doing that, so it's designed to keep some balance.
Organizations that have kind of knowledge.
So, but you guys are going to be charged with doing that because these people will rotate, right? And so that, just like we lose institutional knowledge with staff, we'll lose it with those folks that
So
can.
that would be, also, they would establish the overall project goal, so focus.
Yeah, for sure.
In 12 months, we would like to see
And as the city grows and has different issues and,
and the money grows. Nutritional food.
Easy to say, man, I'm going to support this for $100 worth.
The activities
I'm
would
going
be
to support this for
about
$5 million
serving,
with your
what they do.
with your pinky on the side of the mouth. It's more important that
our numbers. So we're going to have,
and confidence that they're going to spend it well.
200 chickens and whatever. And then the outcomes would be
Money that you're used
as
to
these
seeing.
families are receiving this food, there's financial stability.
It's closer,
but
right now what's sitting in there is $50 million.
So, and
That be spelled out on the station what it is.
we can.
Distribution, 85%.
Yeah, we can.
I mean, I think kind of because like,
15% is,
like what are the Kindle
so
wishes?
15% of that
Of
is.
50 million, but it's of the
Yeah,
earnings, right? Or is it just the
Yeah, yeah, like the-
total amount that's in the trust? account?
Yes, yes, so like what if Kindle wishes apply?
So
They're a nonprofit.
we're not spending in
Don't they know all
expenditures,
the terms?
Yeah.
And it could be
which I've not done a distribution
But
request to
I would
reimburse the
hate
city for
because they're not
our
a big
expenditures
experience.
this year.
Right, yeah, we can
I mean, it's
certainly.
only like a line.
And again, and we can adjust that, so if you think a better worded question that isn't maybe that cumbersome would be, get to the information that you want, then we don't have to.
5% because it's the investment value.
That would be.
I would do interest.
250,000 ballpark.
And then outcomes for measurements. I wrote it down.
A little bit more than Rick's numbers that he was.
Yeah.
Just rounded,
The
rough.
eyes. The eyes
But you would
Yeah.
expect that when Rick was doing it, the interest rates were not there.
Right. Yeah, if you can get 4 or 5% money on,
Whereas 3 years ago, interest was plummeting.
half is what you would look at.
Do we need one?
Debt.
Yeah. Yeah.
I took that as more like what's your name?
Right, I agree.
And how much of that debt was shifted to fixed rate debt. The old stuff that was shifted to fixed rate debt. It'll make the new bond issues really interesting.
Yeah, the ones that we did while you were on council, we're going to have to pay arbitrage on.
You have to do what?
Pay arbitrage.
Oh, yeah. Interesting.
0.77% interest. There's been some fun discussions as we've been closing out the year.
Is the council, are we talking about doing floating rate debt issuance on the new stuff, or are we going to do fixed?
We're not going to issue debt until we spend down the old.
Just because of the interest cost, because of the cost?
Because of delays in projects and everything, that's really what's hurt us, is that with everything happening, it delayed projects getting off the ground and getting started.
Right.
And the same delays that everyone else saw, we saw as a city. And that's really what's hitting us and hitting us hard now.
Interesting.
On those tax exempt bonds,
Yeah.
that they don't want you to make interest on it, so they don't want you to earn money.
Yeah.
And that's what you have to pay back, is the money you earned.
On Pinnacle, it's interesting. Money and stuff. Their short-term CD rates are so much better than everybody else's, and I don't know why the other banks aren't.
John, there's a full one out by the stairs in the lobby.
It's at 9 and 10 months. Now, let's find that.
What would you get on 4 months?
Just think we were right around 4 something, and I didn't want to tie up money for a long time, but it's 4 months. It just, and everybody else wanted like 6, 9. Like, and I talked to somebody about that. Who was it? That's not too, but anyway, they were referring to whoever the president is. Is it McCabe or who's always? Yeah, who's the head guy?
Ma'am? You're not going to write.
Oh, I'm just terrible. I'm thinking as I'm writing, and so I'm squiggling as I'm going, but I'm not forming letters.
I think, I was telling him, like those areas, on page 2.
Yes.
Or page 3, whatever it was, I think it was those 3, healthcare, education. Well, I said, why can't we do like in big committees, have a subcommittee? Like healthcare. I have 2 masters. I have a nurse practitioner.
Yep.
I've raised a whole lot of money for healthcare. I've done grants.
You understand it, and you know it. That's right.
And because y'all wouldn't know any other one on it.
No.
She knows education.
Yeah, I agree.
What if we don't know anything?
And well, you can be a sub-sub.
Can we just get that assistant? We don't know anything.
Sub.
I'll take notes. How about that?
Submarine.
I've already proven myself in that category.
Yeah, hook on with somebody
Yeah,
else.
no, that makes perfect
And then it
sense.
kind of broadens it,
Yeah.
that to here.
Yeah, no, that makes
I mean,
perfect sense
take
to
this
me.
broad subject. I mean, because most of the things that they have subcommittees. They have subcommittees in government. They have
I think
subcommittees.
as this thing grows, that's probably a logical
Because
way
you
to
don't
handle
really
it.
spend a whole lot, when y'all say to me, what about it, knock it out real quick, they will fund it, or not.
Yeah.
That is, not our mission, or they are beyond Rutherford County.
Yep.
That's a good idea.
So save some time.
Was it Turner? Who's the president?
Turner CEO and McCabe is
So
chairman.
anyway, and it made a lot of sense, like their banking, that will go down, and they're not going to tie up a lot of money, paying a lot of interest. For a long time. And I was like, well, that's probably, I said, them dudes are smart.
Yeah.
I mean, they're smart. And I was like, you know what, that makes a lot of sense. I said, and then you see these other banks that are wanting it long term. Are they needing some cash? Where And going like, well, we'll use your cash short term and then.
Reprice it.
Yeah, reprice it. I don't know, that just kind of, when he's, I can't remember who I was talking to, but I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
No, it's a sharp group. They just don't make them like that. And I've had a chance to work
Let's just do them as they are.
growing up in the city, working in the city where you grew up. I've had the chance to work with almost all of the bankers in Murfreesboro, or Rutherford County. Tell you that Turner and McKay are just different than everybody I've ever met.
Yeah.
Very different.
Did we give you coffee?
From a competency
In the
standpoint.
lobby? I go back to, and I talked to Glenn White about this too. all the time.
It's in that break room.
I mean, they were,
Left.
we did millions of foreclosures for them. They were first to get them off the books.
I wish I had a blanket for
This, and this
Let's clean
cat.
up, move on down the road.
Move on.
Wish you had what?
Oh, it's gonna get better, it's gonna get better, it's gonna get better. And they just ripped them loose. And
Shouldn't have all this insulation I have.
Right. So, and this is deep inside baseball, but where you find a lot of times is banks that are elected.
All right, are we ready to dig in?
Not adequate.
Well, we've lost
reserved for those losses.
We lost the girls.
That's what it means. That's what we're dealing with at Mid-South.
Yeah,
Which is why we had to raise capital and go back through. Banco doesn't do that. They see it's bad, we're allocating enough to cover it, and then it's a business decision.
Yeah.
Get rid of it, it's done. We planned for this, because you have to set a certain amount aside when you make those loans. Make a business decision, move on.
Not cheating, just being well prepared.
It's Angela's fault. It's that high-carb lunch that you had.
I did not eat
I'm sorry, excuse me.
But it was delicious, but we're gonna,
can we take a nap?
yes. We're gonna have a dance off. We're gonna get, there you go.
That's right.
And turn the music back on. We're just writing them papers to campaigns. Little team building, get some
exactly
tennis balls,
right.
if we can't get them in the bucket. Video belt. There'll be songs, this is a repeat after me song. We'll return to my roots. Everybody hyped up on that. Thing, it just sticks in your head, it doesn't go away.
Mission over stacking.
Agency, mission over agency staffing.
They're spending their money for the mission instead of staffing.
Looks like several of us have zoomed in over groups that are highly, with a large payroll.
It's tough.
Yeah.
Especially when it's inconsistent, like a large payroll or a large organization on many, many levels.
Mm-hmm.
It starts to show when you're looking at all that, doesn't it? Like what is large? That balance.
Yes. Yeah, dedicated staff is part of any good nonprofit. So,
Sure. Although there's several that are made up of only volunteers, right, without any paid staff. And to run like staff, a volunteer can still be fired. A volunteer can still be, I mean, like that is a process.
yes.
And it's not a fun one. But it is an important one when you're using volunteer-based services.
At Journey Home, they ask us to sign in and out when we volunteer, because they obviously have grants and they can say we have this, they have a staff, which is significant, but then they have thousands and thousands of
Up till
volunteer hours to offset
Midnight, I'm calling you.
We go to bed around 8:15.
Well, good, I'm gonna call you.
All right, shall we jump back in?
Yes.
All right. So what we're going to do now is just go to this application, and this is the part where you're giving Karen and I the work before we read together next time. For us to take the template that Karen's already put some good time into and has dabbled along, kind of drug me along, held my hand through the hard stuff. And now is the part where we take this piece and you going to tell us what you want us to change and do before our next meeting and before you learn how to use the software where you're going to be interacting with the review side on down the line. So this is the important stuff. So get your after lunch stretch on. And we're going to talk about eligibility. So serve citizens in Murfreesboro, Rutherford County. 100% of resources must remain in Murfreesboro, Rutherford County. Money commission over agency staffing as it relates to eligibility. Let's talk about that some. Let's talk about, like, from the trust itself, it is Murfreesboro specific. So there are some agencies that serve Rutherford County as a whole. We have done that before, like with the city funding piece. Like, part of what we ask is what percentage are Murfreesboro citizens. For example, Child Advocacy Center of Rutherford and Cannon counties breaks down their client piece. So even though their agency is larger than Murfreesboro, they're keeping up with their service population very specifically. I'll give you another example. Sac and Harvest is based out of Nashville and out of Smyrna and other places. What they applied for from a program standpoint was funding for Murfreesboro specific food pieces. So looking at how the trust is written, and the trust is written to be very specifically Murfreesboro. So certain things to keep in mind when we're digging into that. It's something we've been very aware of, but help us through that piece to make sure that we don't just kind of broaden by concept. Like, is it either or, because they're two different things?
Yes.
What else along the eligibility do you want to discuss or dig into on the application?
This project aligns with strategic properties. Is that the priority? Sorry, is that the priorities of the committee or the priorities of the applicant?
So that one was aligns with, you could say, either like the city's strategic priorities, it could be the trust.
Yeah, okay,
strategic
all right.
priorities.
Jennifer, the ones that you had pulled up, do you still have those?
And those are the, be the council's strategic priorities, so we can identify if there's, if there's a certain alignment that you want.
I'm going to ask Jennifer to read to us from the trust document.
So the purposes of the trust are to support projects and programs of the city or other nonprofit institutions that benefit the city's inhabitants and improve or enhance the quality of life of the city's inhabitants or aid civic or other public improvements, to promote and advance the social welfare of the inhabitants of the city, to promote and support educational and recreational programs, facilities, and opportunities within the city, to promote and support economic development and employment opportunities within the city, to fund public works within or benefiting the city, and to advance the general welfare of the city and its residents.
So I guess I'm proposing to add to the end of that, of the trust. Project aligns with strategic priorities of the trust.
And then we need to make sure that that is easy for the applicant to find what the priorities are early in the application information.
I'll bring one other, then I'll shut up for a second. Have operating expenses less than XX, and operating expenses, there's some good groups with large operating expenses that do a lot of things. I'm not sure that's really neat. Of course, this is to eligibility. So this is where Carl's people would look at this and get on the front page and get a little bit down and say, we don't meet the eligibility, and delete.
Yeah, why is that line in there?
That's an optional, that's just to give you an example of some of the criteria that you could establish if you wanted to. It's, the only must-haves are that it serves the city residents, and that it's in alignment with the focus area of the trust. So it has to be within the city limits. The operating expenses is totally optional. We can take that out. That's just an example.
We could put another financial trigger that would throw it out, because that's what this is triggers under the eligibility. Is there a financial trigger that we want to use to?
I don't see it, I don't see why we would get, why it matters how big the organization is if they meet our needs.
So let's say the Chamber of Commerce comes to you and says, we'd like to have $20,000 to fund a program at the Chamber to help small business.
Which would fall under economic development.
You're going to get, that's where this kind of goes across the board. It's not just needy children or needy whatever. It could be that, all kind of stuff like that.
And again, remember, this is the first year process. So you can always go through this first year process and see what happens and what you get. And then the following year, you could come back and say, that we need to put in some kind of limit. We need to say, we won't accept applications from any organization over $5 million or something like that.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind. But we're...
That's what you're saying there is the operating expenses?
Yeah, so it would be like your organization's budget is, if you're operating, you can go low or high. So if your organization's operating budget is below 50,000, then, we don't want to deal with those. Or if your organization's operation budget is more than 5 million, we don't want to deal with those. So you can.
And this is going to be for the first cut? This is going to instantly eliminate people or?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and can you think of another financial trigger that we could use to eliminate people that really it's not our target audience?
Like let me go back to the live hospice. They have over a $5 million operating budget a year.
Just here in Rutherford County?
I would say there's in Rutherford County. It all comes out of
Murfreesboro?
Nashville. Yeah, it's the same organization. So, it would be more.
And the group may not agree with this, but wouldn't it be easier to do that on the bottom side? Like you were saying, a $50,000 operating budget. If somebody comes to the table and has a $5,000 operating budget, that's going to show somewhat of the structure of that organization, which has implications related to leadership, sustainability, history, not judging the service, which, this is the part of this that's going to get tricky. Is there good being done by this $5,000 operating budget? Well, of course, there's presumably some good being done, but do we want to review that? Is that something that's going to meet? So I think it'd be easier to limit it on the bottom side than it would be the top side, because it's just going to be hard to know.
That's a great comment. We don't want it to be an eligibility criteria. We want it to be a factor that they report on, so that when you're scoring, you can say, man, that agency is just too big or too small for me to prioritize in my score, right? So it's not a kick you out, you're eligible or not eligible on the front side. It is a factor for you to weigh later in the process.
Okay, so we're looking at removing the financial trigger under choices.
Let me read the criteria piece also. Area of service that corresponds with the trust agreement must be based in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Provide services but not at location, i.e. Second Harvest.
Yeah, I was just saying, I don't think that they have to be based out of Murfreesboro. I just think that they have to serve Murfreesboro. But I know Wade is the one who put based.
At least the operations in Murfreesboro, they need to have a home base here. In other words, if they're out of Chicago, Illinois, and they're coming down here 3 weeks out of the year doing something, and they don't even have am I trying to say, I don't know how to Am I making sense?
You want a consistent
Like the
presence.
Boys and Girls Club, they're all over the country, but they've got one right here.
Right.
Alive Hospice, they're all over the country, but they've got it right here, you know, and Second Harvest, I think the same way, right? They've got a brick and mortar building somewhere here, right?
In Smyrna.
In Smyrna, okay.
Smyrna,
So that,
Laverne, but they have
I don't
a,
want to eliminate
but
them.
you're really talking about way to consistent,
Constantly
providing a need.
someone you can call right here that knows.
Like Paul's, they are Cannon County and they're Murfreesboro too. So you wouldn't want to knock them out because they go to Cannon County.
Okay, so what we could say is instead of project is in Murfreesboro city limits, we could say project operates in Murfreesboro city limits. Does that meet the intent that you were talking
I'm
about?
thinking it has to have a location here, a permanent location.
Does Second Harvest actually have a location here?
They don't have their staffing offices here. They have very regular distribution partners. So they partner with Murfreesboro churches and organizations to bring in trucks. You might know more about it.
Yeah, I mean, one of their warehouses is Smyrna, Laverne. I mean, but they have a constant, consistent presence within Murfreesboro City.
There are people that in Murfreesboro that have gotten food
Absolutely.
competitively.
And they partner with Greenhouse, partner with other food distribution ministries, so that, but that's to your point, Wade, but you could pick up a phone, call that person would say, let's meet tomorrow for coffee at Brass Horn.
But consistent presence, is that too vague a term to use?
I think it's tricky.
Yeah, because you also get into the fact, like, the Girl Scout organization is based out of Nashville. They're headquartered in Nashville, but they provide services here. Like, they may not have at one time they had a field office here, but they may not have that anymore. The same with Boy Scouts.
The Boy Scouts don't have an office here, but they might.
Well, that's what we got to decide. Are we going to,
And I won't make it more complicated by saying, like Feed America First. I'm not advocating for one or the other, but Feed America First has a presence in Murfreesboro, but I don't know that they necessarily pay for their presence in Murfreesboro. I think somebody donates that space, right? So that's even more tricky. We're talking about having a presence, having a corporate office. Is it physically located here? That space could go away. I mean, now, that information could also be old.
So I'm suggesting that it's a project operates in Murfreesboro city limits. If we do that, we want to add another line, which is project maintain, or organization maintains offices within Murfreesboro city limits. I'm saying
to
not.
me, if they're so big that they provide services here, but they're not based here, then do they need what funds we have available to allocate out to the local organizations of Murfreesboro? And that's the fine line.
And I feel like it still talks back to exactly what Ronnie said about the last question also, right? Is it a deal breaker eligibility criteria, or is it something that you want to score later in the process and where you want to weigh that? Like, is it a deal breaker, we're not going to see your application, or, man, I don't love this. I don't feel like this is the strong Murfreesboro connection I'm looking for, so I'm going to score this lower than I'm scoring the one that has an office. And you guys can choose. It's just whether or not you want to eliminate the option.
I like this, go ahead, I'm
No,
sorry.
I just think you got to be somewhat specific when they're filling that out, like it's a yes or no, I'm here or I'm not here, or some, because that's going to be the thing that's going to keep us from wading through a lot of stuff and figuring out, okay, is this right or is this wrong? It's going to instantly.
What if it's a yes or no question, but we don't trigger it? If it is a no, it doesn't go in the no pile. It goes in information for you to read.
Because the project could be how to establish themselves more in Murfreesboro. That could be their whole project, which is we want to get into Murfreesboro. This is the success we've had in Cannon County or in Lebanon, and that's what the project is. That way we can at least weigh what they're saying to us.
That's a great one.
We're assuming we know everything that's going to happen in the future by saying if you're not obvious here today, then you won't be here, it won't be important down the line. So that's a good point.
So a no, if they're not physically out here, doesn't necessarily, we see it somewhere.
We can ask it in a way so that you as the reviewer sees yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, but you're still going to see it because it doesn't trigger them.
You have a physical address in Murfreesboro, Tennessee.
Yeah. Right.
Yes or no?
And if
That's
it's-
not a deal killer, it's just an answer, a question.
So let's move
If
that.
the answer is no, you're going to dig harder to really make them convince you why they're deep in our.
Right, and then it might make sense to fund them, but it might not.
On a no, it's going to trigger another question to explain, like when you fill out stuff, it says no, explain why. So that would be the thing that would send it over here. It's no, and then it could be something to the effect of, you do still serve Murfreesboro or whatever. There's some kind of something that's going to ask them the next question as to why we are giving you money. And if they don't fill that out, then they're obviously a no. I mean, they're not going to get past that, if that makes any sense.
So if it's not going to kick us out, why don't we move it from eligibility down to general information? Because eligibility was generally things that are required. General information just tells us, oh, so they don't maintain an office at Murfreesboro, and that just kind of...
That's a great point. So I'm going to grab the no page from earlier, from the before lunch crowd, and let's see if there's anything on here that you want to save them the trouble of applying, right? Or if all of these are just things that are going to weigh in your score.
Well, run down the list.
Okay. Focus on a small group, high operational expenses, any programs that exclude. I believe there is there a trigger there of the discrimination Title VI clause?
No, there's a question that asks about the demographics or the population that you're serving.
Okay. No track record. Do we want to put a startup piece as an eligibility? And then throw out a good year requirement for it. You've been in operation for
3 years.
3?
I'm okay with that. That's good.
Over, under, agree?
No, I think 3 would be good.
I just, I guess, I'll defer to y'all, but I don't know if there's like a need that comes up that I don't know if there's some kind of medical crisis that we hadn't had before, that 3 years would, like what if something had started out during COVID and that we really would have a desperate need for, but they wouldn't have been around for 3 years?
I would say for them applying, it would be safe to say that. I would say for maybe our bylaws or future criteria of this committee, you could put that in there. In case of an unforeseen emergency, the committee can meet at whatever, at a called upon meeting to discuss. But then again, your money is like once a year, it's doled out, and then you wait till next year, and then once a year, and then it's doled out. So it's not like, well, there's constant money coming.
Things come up, like, that might have a longer, I just don't want us to rule out something that comes up that's like, thankfully not an issue today.
Yeah.
There's a later question about partnerships and collaboratives. So what if that very needed startup needed a partnering established organization to be the key applicant? Would that make you more comfortable? It would make me more comfortable.
Like the Red Cross, something.
Like they have to partner up with an eligible, the same way there's the library and there's the Friends of the Library, and the Friends of the Library is the nonprofit, right? There are a lot of big agencies that have a nonprofit whose specific job it is to fill that niche, right?
So what you're talking about is, so there's a couple different ways that could be approached. Do you want fiscal agents? So it would be a nonprofit that maybe hasn't gotten its 501c3 designation, so it partners with the Journey Home, and so the Journey Home acts as its fiscal agent to apply for the funding. So basically what that's saying is Journey Home's going to be the recipient of the money, they're going to hold on to the money, but this non-profit is going to be doing
Kind of sponsored by almost, yeah.
So, that would be an example of an eligibility question where you would say that, we don't accept fiscal agents, like you can't you have to apply under your 501c3 organization. You know, the other eligibility, like what Angela's example was, it would be if you're an organization that's less than 3 years in existence, then you must show proof of partnership with a more established organization. But do you want to dictate the pizza like that? How?
I'm going to make just a comment too. So I think you make a great point about an immediate need. I think part of where I would come from on this, and it clearly does not make me right, is I think if there is that type of crisis, we're not the only organization in the community that might be responding to that. I think others will be. So I wouldn't want to feel the burden. I'm probably not going to feel the burden of it's our responsibility to fix this, right? There's an immediate need and it's our responsibility to fix this. I think we're going to know, generally speaking, what agencies we serve and we support, and we're going to know most of those things normally. And I think it gets slippery when we start talking about the partnership with other agencies and how that allows a workaround around that, because we could be unintentionally creating some consequences to how that's done. When if you go back to, and this is just my personal view, because we're all going to have things that are important to us as we go through this, as we're scoring and evaluating. But I think for me, if an organization has not had a track record to know who's running it, not what they're doing in the service and the need, because we're always going to be able to align with, hey, there is a need for that thing. But if it has not been around to proof it, what I also know is even if the Journey Home or fill in the blank, whoever is going to sponsor it, they can't possibly know the same thing that we can't possibly know, which is, have they been successful in the past doing this? And I'm shifting that burden to someone else to monitor, which I'm probably not going to do. Now, that's only going to affect Ronnie Martin as I'm scoring, right? It doesn't have to affect the group, but I'm just saying it for the good of the group.
Think about a brand-new group, whether it's under emergency or it's just somebody with a great idea. They don't have a track record of stewardship with their money. We don't know how they're going to spend it. We don't know, because there's no track record to look at. And so that would be the negative to giving a new organization a bunch of funds.
Okay, let's do this. Well, first we read through this piece, see if there's anything burning on this, and then let's set this one to the side, and then we'll go through all of the questions and see if that rises up any more things that you guys want to put in the deal breaker category. And so what we were doing this one first, we'll also do it last, so that we have a chance to review the difference between the softer questions and the hard no piece. Is that okay? So organizations with too high overhead, duplication of mission, executive turnover multiple times in a short time frame, not meeting basic needs, or helping a large portion of the community. So if we table our eligibility criteria to the end and revisit, because these are the questions that will weed out the application so you don't even see them.
Good call.
Okay, so next. Karen, which one should we grab next? Project scope?
No, there was general information.
Okay. Organizational background. What is the history of the organization? Was it founded in Murfreesboro? That's interesting. Who were the founders and first board of directors? What is the mission? How has the mission changed over the years? And how many employees are on the payroll? What kind of discussion do you have about the organizational background? What else do you want to know? How deep into the pizza making so that it doesn't become burdensome to the applicant versus, man, I didn't know these basics. You've got to. Let's move on.
Project scope next. Yes. This is scope. Remove areas outside of those listed in foundation percent plan. Let them be the other. That's great. Put an explanation of percent amounts with the something plan. Example, education 25%. Explain that funds will be given outside of these areas. Help me with the one word that I missed.
I'm just saying, like, just list in the categories, which I can't figure out where we are, what page, but in the, when the option, okay, yeah. Please select focus area of that this project addresses. I believe we should only list the 3 categories that are listed in the trust document and put an explanation of what percentage of our funds goes to those areas. And then don't put health-related services, but just put other, some explanation saying that we give this much, because it's, 65% or something, to other areas.
That would delete arts and culture and animal services.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
That's great feedback, because then it's going to help with that alignment piece back to the trust document, and it's going to help the applicants that are reading through, deciding whether or not this is a good fit for them. It's going to help them see what we're looking for from the very beginning, right? Yeah. Okay. So let me provide some devil advocate information. So these categories align with the statement that Jennifer read about the broader scope of why the trust was established to provide these type services within the Murfreesboro. So these were the ones that were listed in the trust document.
Okay, it was listed in the other area, not the percentage part.
Right, so it's the overall, I think it was the opening statement, basically, of why this trust was established. So it's in that piece.
Under 5, on A3.
Of the trust document.
So it's not written exactly the same.
So I broadly pulled out those categories that it lists in that paragraph of things.
So if it's going to go back to align to that, then it needs to, or I would think, it would be advanced, social wealth. I mean, the categories benefit the city inhabitants is A, advance the social welfare of the inhabitants, educational, recreational programs, facilities, and opportunities. I would use the same language.
Okay, and that's on page.
Does that make sense?
Page 3 of the.
Page 3.
Yes.
A3 of the trust agreement.
So
either
It's under history.
either make it aligned with the percentage value piece, or go back to the trust agreement piece under item 5 for the trust purposes.
honestly, we can do better than just how it's written.
Right, and put the.
Let's work on that.
Yeah.
That makes good sense. So from a grant writer perspective, the 25% piece can be a little bit confusing, because as an organization, I wouldn't know what that 25% referred to, because what that is referred to is the total allocation of funds available for you to distribute. So it doesn't have anything to do with me. It's all on your end of what you're allowed to distribute back into the community. Does that make sense?
So maybe include it in the information portion at the beginning of the whole document.
Yes. And I think we have that space in the application. I don't think it printed out. So I will go back and make sure that there is that category percentage in that information.
That's a lot to work on. That's great. Can the project be achieved in a certain amount of time and the timeline? So this group has the opportunity to do an annual gift in that mix. It is common among some organizations to do like a 3-year commitment, all of those things. Here in our baby steps, and I'll just throw out my opinion, is that should come later as we're getting into this. But you know, that's just my opinion. Talking right now, and then I'll be quiet, right? Where that piece can come in from the timeline, like what do you want to see from can the project start? Does it need to be complete before the next round of application? Are you open to a project that has a very broad end, like a lack of an ending? Or do you want them to really define, this is what's going to happen over the course of the next 12 months? Like how much do you want to give them to respond to in that timeline piece? And we don't have to even answer that, just kind of something to think about when you're looking. But the timeline will matter, and I think it's one of the questions, like when will the project start and when will it end? For some programs, you know, hey, we're looking to do a 12-week series with this focus, with this group of people. It will start on this date, it will end on this date. This is the project we're looking to fund. For some, it will be a lot more broad, right? It's like, man, every day after school we do this, and in the summer we do the same thing with this group of kids, right? Do you have a strong preference or opinion about that timeline piece?
Yeah, can we say a proposed timeline for use of allocated funds? And they may say, well, this will all be used during the summer because this is a summertime youth program, or this will go into our general operating expenses to keep us open for the next 12 months and distribute it evenly.
Yeah, so within the general description or guidelines, it does identify that the project year or the use of funds have to be used between July 1st through June 30th. So an example might be that the domestic violence program is applying for services that are ongoing. They provide those services daily throughout the year, but within that scope of the year, they can still identify that they're going to serve, 200 people in the shelter. They're going to serve, 300 people, with counseling services. So even though that their project is ongoing, that's their daily focus of operations, they can still define in that time period, what they can do. Or if it's, say Read to Succeed is applying for money, and they know that they're going to do school-based programs, they're going to do the reading in the schools or whatever it is, so they know that their project is going to last from September 1st through May 30th. So it provides that broad opportunity through those project dates to identify that.
Thank you.
Does that clarify? Okay. Make sure all agencies have information online to apply for. And how will project success be measured? Comments or expanding views do you want to offer for those? All right, let's keep it going. Governance leadership capacity. How often does a board turn over? Future eligibility and election process for this committee on contributions. So we talked a little bit earlier about that governance and their leadership capacity, like what is the organization's piece?
Karen, do you want to kind of tell, like, the questions that are there now along these lines?
Yeah, so the existing questions, there's an organization background question, which is briefly describe services provided, most recent accomplishments, and leadership structure. That question may encompass too much, and we may need to break it into maybe 2 or 3 different questions. There's also a board description. Please briefly describe the demographic makeup of your board, meeting structure, and recruitment strategies. Please disclose any family relationships among board members. Then we ask that they attach a PDF copy of their board list that includes officers' terms and places of employment. And then we ask, do you have a current succession plan? That's a yes, no. Does your organization have 4 to 6 months of operating expense and revenue? That's kind of a stability question. Do you have a current strategic plan? Does your organization have written and board-approved HR policies and financial policies? And then it asks to upload an organizational chart.
One of the comments that someone wrote that was really good is staff and staff turnover. Is there a place in this where we can say, please list your current staff, their position, and the length, and when they started that position?
We can. I will say that like, so that falls into kind of some burdensome type questions. So if you're looking at, the overall kind of the length of the application versus, so we can ask that, but just make sure as we finalize this that we kind of balance that.
Okay.
That information. But
We could even add the word key staff members, because we don't really need to know who, fixes the boiler. We just need to know who runs the place.
we can ask key staff average length of
Tenure.
tenure.
Thank you.
Okay. And then regarding this committee, that's a whole other topic outside of the application.
Yeah,
But an important one, right?
Yeah.
So tell me what your thoughts are.
Well, I kind of, I didn't know where to put that question, but as we're putting all this together, we also got to look at the future for this group. As people roll off, how will we elect new people?
Maybe we could put that on the agenda for a future meeting, and we can bring the documents when it was first established, because I think a lot of that is outlined pretty clear in those, and we can bring that and kind of dig into the discussion. Because you're right, like, we're spending a lot of time on this, getting the first one started, so you want to know what kind of longevity that's going to have in that process, I'm sure.
Well, actually, Carl and I roll off very quickly, so we would like to know that.
Okay. I will, before that next meeting, I'll put that on the things to research and bring back, because I think it is set pretty specifically, and we'll report back on what that is. Goals, objectives, and measures. How many people will be impacted by your nonprofit? Is this a new project or a continuation of an old project? What are you trying to accomplish or solve? What need? Spell out what is being asked regularly regarding the SMART goal, intended output, and outcome. Make documents easy for the novice to understand and complete. 3.1. Karen, do you want to kind of kick off some of the immediate parts of those questions?
Yeah, no, so we talked about, I had listed SMART goals, intended outputs, and intended outcomes. Those might be, a newer organization might not understand, what that measures or what that means. So we'll change that wording up to be a little bit more generic. I think one of the questions is in the other part of the application. Refresh my memory on what We kind of ask that in the project scope, but we don't ask it as a specific question, so we can definitely break it out into just a numeric short answer question. How many people do you plan to serve? With this, I do ask if this is a new project or a continuation of an old project in the project scope section.
Okay.
What are you trying to accomplish or serve what need? That's kind of also driven in the project scope section, project description. Yeah, and then we address the language, making it a little bit more simpler. Yeah. Did that get everybody's?
What else do we need to discuss? What else is important about this page? Or do you really want to drive on in?
The listed goals and output, I think, are pretty accurate description of what was written down there. And I noticed that the character limit here is very generous, much more than in the other parts. And I think we all focus that we would like to see how will success be measured. I think that's reflected in the space within the character limit.
Very detail oriented there, Lyle. I'm impressed. I didn't notice that part.
Yeah.
Karen was probably the intentional in there. Do you want to see it something different? Like by generous, do you think too generous, you've got things to do?
No, like I said, and yes, as Carl's mentioned, we want to kind of limit that. And that's one place I think that we need to open that up to determine this, how is success measured.
With need, must show they have to have these dollars to succeed. More specific, the better. The main thing, the purpose of the organization before anything else. So you want to hear both the organization, its goals, its mission, its values, its purpose, and then the project that they're asking to find, and dig into that. Tell me about that statement. I'm not sure whose that is.
Which one is it, the third one?
You're talking about the purpose?
Yes.
The third one.
I mean, yeah, I think for an organization, you got to first tell what you do, what's the money going for and all that before you get into anything else, because it might be something we're not even, can do.
Right.
So let us know what all this is about before you go through all this stuff. It may not even be what we're looking for.
What else? Like as far as how they express their need.
I think it's all kind of still up in the air in a way, especially early on when the funds are limited.
Right.
What we can support and successfully support, or just to help with.
Okay. And along those lines, their financials. Budget, percentage by salaries, physical facilities, direct assistance, etc. List of funding sources, amount of other grants, and the top funders that their organizations receiving from other places. Who, what accounting CPA or firm is providing the financials for this nonprofit. Great pieces. There are, for the agencies that don't do the professional audit piece, there is a governmental form that if you don't do that, then you should use this.
Is that the 990? Most recent audited financials are 990. I don't know what the 990 is.
So the 990 is the IRS tax filing document, so all nonprofits have to file it. Smaller nonprofits will have the easy form, so I think if your operating budget is less than $15,000 or $25,000, then you don't have to file one, but anything over that, it's required and it's a public document.
Okay, thank you. Well, along the same lines, I'm ignorant as to what a copy of the IRS letter of determination is.
Yeah, so that's the official, so when you apply to the IRS to become a nonprofit, then they issue a letter of determination, so that's the kind of the official designation showing that, yeah, you are a recognized federal nonprofit entity.
Okay.
Just a general comment too, I think on the financials piece, we assume that all of that looks the same, and the truth is, it looks very different depending upon the organization and who's compiling it. And of course, if you're only dealing with nonprofits that have CPA prepared, CPA reviewed, CPA compiled stuff, it's going to look very similar. If you're dealing with a small organization, it could be unreadable sometimes, to where you're like, I don't even know what this means, right? Because it's not prepared.
Yeah, or somebody that calls themselves the bookkeeper, and really they're just
it's not
throwing together numbers.
And that sounds tough. I'm not trying to be tough, but from the standpoint, if we're going to have anything like that in there, some forethought about some consistency about how it looks would be good. It may not be possible, but it would be good.
When you guys see their financials, so we're going to ask them to show us the report, what are some of the things off the top of your head that are going to jump out at you? What are you going to, as you're looking through the revenues, the expenses, you're really kind of looking at those numbers, what kind of things?
The overhead.
The overhead?
Officers' salaries.
Yeah. The staff salaries comparison to the output of funds.
Administration salary.
And I'm just going to make that comment again. If it's not prepared consistently across the board, it's going to be real hard to know what you're looking at. So we can say, we want to know salaries, we want to know overhead, we want to know those things. But if there's not some consistency with what they do, which means maybe we provide them something that we say, fill this out. Right, so that way we want to know what officer salaries are, we want to know what overhead is, we want to know.
Real simply put, what's that, what's a percentage to that?
Take your form and fill this sheet out.
That's great.
That way we can compare what those things are, because I'm just telling you, I've seen 100 sets of financial statements from nonprofits, and about half the time I have to call them and say, hey, I don't know what this means. I don't understand.
And you're 2 steps ahead of me because I didn't know what it means. Like that's what you do all day is look at other people's numbers.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's easy if it's the same, right? So you're getting CPA stuff, well, that's pretty easy. It's just a matter of whether or not I understand it or can figure it out. But if somebody has their own unique method, and lots of people do,
yes,
and there's nothing wrong with that, but when you get to the point where you're applying for a grant, there probably needs to be some consistency in how the financial information comes in.
And don't you think for what we're looking for, it should be relatively easy for them to
Yeah,
put that
you
in an
can make it real
easy
simple.
outline?
Yeah.
Well, honestly, if I'm going to be reading this, I need it to be easy.
Me
So
too.
that, okay.
Sure.
Because the easier it is, the faster we can go through it.
Well, you have a little more knowledge in that area than I do, so.
And what I'm hearing from you all is that you're very interested in the specific, from a staff salary standpoint. And we can ask for that, we do with the existing city process, we ask for that to be disclosed. And at that point, it becomes public record. And for a viable nonprofit that is looking to spend funds like that, I think that's fair. And we've done it for years on that side too, but if you want to be sure to see that, we can certainly ask.
And that's the last thing I'll say. There are a lot of really good nonprofits that don't have great financial preparation, but they do great work. So you also don't want to arbitrarily judge someone. You want to judge them fairly, but there's some stuff that's terrible.
So, in the attachment portion, is it something that we don't want to ask for because you know you're not going to look at it or review it? Do you still want financial statements? Do you still want, because 990s and audited financials are two different things. So do you still want both of those? 990s are your consistent. Like all 990s are formatted the same. So you can go to this page and.
My opinion on that, for the committee records, yes, we should need for this committee's meeting, we just want a bullet point sheet of those things that are important.
Okay. And if those things say either the executive salaries or the overall
Overall staff salaries.
salaries. When those, if the form is simple, where they say, okay, our salaries are $200,000, that's put in there, and our expenses are X, if that generates a percentage, that is either going to kick them in or kick them out. Because if their expenses, if their salaries are 80% of their budget, it's going to be out, in my opinion. I'm just trying to keep it simple, a simple form.
Yeah, but then again, and glad you're back with us, because I've got a question, and that is, part of what we're doing here is not necessarily help needed charities. This could also be enhancing the community. And so let's say my organization is Banjo Players for the Square. And we've got 15 professional banjo players who want to set up every weekend and play banjo music. And it's going to really set us apart, put us on, the morning national news. And the city wants to do that, then 90% of my funds are going to our salaries. That's a stupid example, but you know what I mean?
It would make my brother so happy.
I love banjo music too, so I'm all in for it.
You know what I'm saying? This conversation oftentimes gets going over into the help, needy children and feed the people, but
You do have to be somewhat careful in a strict objective analysis, because there is variance. If you have a small nonprofit that is medically oriented and you hire one doctor
That's right.
that you want to get a good person, your salaries are going to be, you're not going to get anybody otherwise. So your salary is going to be pretty high. And so really what you have to look at, and you have to balance that against, well, what are they producing? What's their outcome? But yeah, you could have something along the lines, probably would fit under economic development or community lifestyle choices, that would be all salary based, because, they don't have any other administrative costs or anything else that goes with it, and they're not giving away any money. So I think you have to be somewhat flexible in some of those.
ask the question to know the answer, but we don't have to base our decision on
That's
it.
the way to do it. Then you weight it depending on what the organization is and what they're doing.
That is, in the medical example, I've got a buddy that has one, and their income, all their donations go to fund the doctors and the nurses, which are providing the free service.
Yeah.
So that is right, so.
And all of this circles right back to what we had tabled for the last time, with that letter of intent concept. And I want to read those, if you haven't read those yet. I'm for it, but what not, a letter of intent, letter of interest, whatever the I stands for, right? I'm for it, but what knocks a group out? The general information section will eliminate some groups, and mission statement of the organization, timing of process, LOI phase open X to X, time to renew and ask to go to the next phase, full application open X to X. So Craig, what we had talked about with that as one of the things on our homework to do is to research whether or not the trust would allow the preliminary letter of interest, letter of intent before they filled out the complete application, to save organizations that weren't going to be funded the trouble of going through the whole piece, and to save this group from reviewing a bunch of applications that weren't going to be funded.
I don't think that would be a problem.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we'll raise it with the trust board, but I think they would be perfectly fine vetting through preliminary applications.
So we,
And informally, the next step, of course, is council, and informally, we can run that along there if we see anything in there that might raise a council interest as well. And that would save a lot of time too, if it's just going to be a veto. I don't envision that happening much, if ever, but we can handle this the same way.
okay. Our other things on our homework list is digging more into the 501c3 versus some nonprofits that might not have the C3 status but might have C4 or some of the other.
C6 or something.
C6, so we're going to dive into whether or not we want to open that, and if so, how far, and if we can, because it might have been written in a C3 specific way, correct?
Yeah, 501c3 is a IRS code provision. That's why you say it's used as an acronym more or less for a nonprofit. But really, the correct term is a nonprofit because you can be a lot of different forms. And you can provide community service and just decide, I don't know why you would, but in theory you could, run your business nonprofit and just not bother with all the designations and handle things that way. So I think we should focus on whether they are a nonprofit. The easiest way to do that is give us your certifications for 501c whatever. If they don't have that, then the next question is, well, how do you do your nonprofit status? So, yeah.
And then all legal and non-discriminatory issues to be researched and decided before we get too far along. Wade, tell me what you're thinking of that, other than the obvious.
I'm sure there's legal and discriminatory things we should know before we start making decisions along the lines of these funds and how they're earmarked and the way they're earmarked for us to be allocating. I mean, that sounds like it may have already been done, but is there anything we need to know for now and for the future?
Okay. So at our next meeting, maybe just have some more information about the discriminatory pieces. What kind of things do you need to know?
As we're rolling along and we get an application and we start discussing it, and then we find out later that you can't give to that organization these particular funds because you'd be discriminating against these people. Or, that's a...
So if there is an agency that is asking for something that you know would be controversial in some way, before you get too deep in the process, you want to know what the rules are?
The other way around.
Other way around?
Yeah, let's set the rules before we get the application.
Right.
And put it on the application, and that would be provided through your legal department.
Yeah, generally, there is a standard contractual provision that we kind of put in there that the city doesn't permit, you know what it says, doesn't permit discrimination and all the other things that are in there, and it's a general statement. We don't have, the federal government, if you do anything with the federal government, there are laws and regulations that really focus on a lot of that. We don't have those. The state doesn't have, it has some, but it doesn't have as many, certainly as the federal government has. But I think the general statement could, and if anything rises to the attention, what I assume there is, and I apologize, I just got pulled away, but once they submit the application, is there a process to go back and ask questions of the organization?
We haven't established that.
Oh, okay. But there should, in that way, if you read through this and it raises any questions, you should go back to, certainly give staff or have staff would do it at the first instance, go back and say, here's our concerns, tell us what, you're doing. So the concern usually isn't that you discriminate against two different agencies when you give money. Discrimination is this agency discriminating somehow in this process? That's the bigger concern. That's what the federal...
Considered public funds, right?
Considered public funds, yeah.
What we're dealing with.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But once we go through the criteria and stuff, and we're just, as we do the application and go through this, we're justifying how that money's going out. So it's really hard to build a discrimination question on that. This is America, anybody can sue anybody for anything at any time. But generally speaking, those would be really hard to justify from that. But we do want to be cautious and make sure that whatever organization given to doesn't have a history of discrimination, doesn't target some type of service that might be discriminatory. And so that's where we go back and ask for more information to assure that we're not giving funds that end up being used in a discriminatory manner.
I'm jumping ahead of the game on this. So after we score this, all these applications that come in so start out with the pre-application. Then they get the application, they complete it in the timely manner in the month. Then we score it. Is there a time period that we're supposed to be, several meetings back we talked about that we might be meeting with the nonprofits, or we just score it and have a meeting after that and we evaluate our scoring?
Good question. Let's talk this next piece. Because we've got about 20 minutes to wrap up. And it's a great segue into the concept of what that looks like from the review piece. So at our next meeting, we'll have this application finalized. Before we get to that point, like, you really need to know what you're going to do after the application gets in your hand, right? And ask Karen to kind of talk through the document that I just passed out.
Yeah, and again, this is draft, nothing set in stone. These are just, putting kind of best practices on paper to give you kind of a starting point. And some of this may answer some of your eligibility questions and things like that. So if you're not catching it on the front end, you're putting it into the evaluation piece to navigate through that. So the way that we initially set this up, and we can look at changing it, but was setting up all the questions on a Likert scale of 1 to 5. So basically, 5 being an excellent application, you have no qualms, there's no red flags, nothing stands out, you're all on board, your gut feeling is, yeah, this is great, this is going to do good things, I don't have any questions or concern, all the way to 1, which, is a really bad application, you don't understand what they're doing, you don't feel like it fits, it doesn't have community impact, those type things. So basically just providing some criteria around what 5 looks like versus 1. And then trying to closely align this with the application. So does it fit within the trust focused areas and objectives? Does the organization have enough years, either as a 501c3 or as an established nonprofit organization? Does the organization show strong capacity through its history? So those are the questions that you would consider when you're scoring that section. So from a history perspective, if you look at these 2 questions and you would say, yeah, I feel like it does have really strong history. I do feel like it shows that it's been a really established organization. I think it should get a 5. So, and then, looking at the amount requested and looking at all the information that they're provided, do you think it's a reasonable request? No, if it's 4, that would get a 1. I feel very strongly it would get a 5. So that's kind of how we generally outline this evaluation process to begin with. And then going back to leadership and governance, does the organization have a dedicated board and leadership? Score it 1 to 5. Does the leadership and governance provide enough capacity to successfully support projects? And if you see that it has a strong board, it's very diverse, the roles are appropriate, it has the right leadership to it, so you would weigh that section by scoring it a 1 to 5. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Does that align with kind of how your vision is with going through the evaluation process?
Yes.
So the information that we dug into on the application side and the feedback that we got from you, when we meet again, we're going to make adjustments to these questions. We don't have to go through them in the same way because we've already discussed the big topics. So we'll go through and look at that scoring piece and make sure that the feedback that you gave us today matches the application, matches the review, and get that finalized and back in a format for at our next meeting to be able to get that finalized piece in front of you by the end of that. What big ideas, things that you think need to be reinforced, things that you feel like needs to go back to that eligibility and criteria that we really got hung up on for good reason, like the deal breaker knockout pieces? What kind of, as we wrap things up, we've got 20 minutes until 2. What kind of things do you want to make sure that we discuss before we go?
So that they could get a perfect score would be 60 points, it looks like.
based on this piece now, but after we go back through
Okay.
and maybe add in some more pieces,
Okay.
based on the feedback that you got, that could change.
So this is our homework till the next meeting. Just think about this.
I think more of all of the work we did up until now is our homework.
Yeah.
And then your job is going to be to react at our next
Yeah,
meeting
okay.
to how we interpret. You can tell us whether or not we listened well and got it right. So we'll be the student, you'll be the teacher on grading whether or not we took the feedback that you gave us today and got the intent piece back into the application, and especially into the scoring piece, because that's the part that you all are going to interact with the most. We will also, as we make the application, one of the things that the founded people have asked Erin and I to do is to, after we create the application, is to start to finish fill it out ourselves.
That's
See
smart.
how bad it hurts.
Okay.
Right? And we will get it to a format that if you want to do that also, we should be able to, after you've had the training on that piece, we should be able to have a process where you can kind of do that same piece and really dig in on more.
We meet next on a Tuesday, the 12th. Could we possibly get your updated one of this form application prior to that so that we can kind of red mark any suggestions, thoughts, remarks prior to the meeting?
So like an early agenda packet with attachments?
I mean, 24 hours would be plenty.
I mean, I think we can do that. Are you going to have it ready?
Yeah.
And, okay.
Oh, yeah, I've got full faith in Karen.
Well, and
Could be done way before that.
I was just thinking about how we can distribute the information in that piece.
And an email.
Yeah.
is this going to be two pieces where it's the simple eligibility one that is either going to be, if you don't even qualify, that we're going to see, and then are we going to see the actual application? Or what are we?
It's a good question, and I think the answer depends on where we lie with that letter of interest or letter of intent, right? Because if that focuses only on bare bones eligibility,
Okay.
like, or if we get in a little bit deeper to that, is that, I mean, I think we can show you both.
Carl, you don't think that maybe the eligibility being the very first part of the application would do the same thing?
Well, I'm just asking if that's what they're providing. The eligibility one is first. I mean, they got to know if we got to make a cut, don't we? Is that what you're saying? Or are we going to see the whole thing? I'm asking a question.
The information that we get to you in advance of Tuesday, September 12th, we're going to have it as complete as we can so that the next steps will be easier.
Okay.
Or we're not going to hold back the next piece.
Okay.
And I would add in this existing draft, if there's any questions that we didn't ask that you feel are really strong, that should be asked, please email those to me. If you feel like any questions are worded awkwardly or you don't understand what's being asked, send those to me, any comments or anything that you would want to see. I did note that I didn't ask any questions about volunteers, so if that's important to you, maybe we need to add, a question about, do you use volunteers? So I can throw that in there too.
Be a great question.
Any other? Yes, Ryan?
Just a couple things, and I can totally be wrong about this because I've never done this, but in looking through like the governance piece, I'm less sensitive to that than maybe some others would be, so I'd probably get rid of all kinds of governance related things, just simply because I think if we're picking from a group, a pool of applicants that have history, I think there's some history of governance, and board directors and officers, I think, goes a long way with people who associate with those organizations from my standpoint, from a credibility standpoint. But also in thinking about the response and workload for the board members, I'm thinking about character limits on this. I think it's better to be forced to say fewer words and make your point more quickly. And so in conjunction with having long character spaces and pages of information, I'd force them into a tighter box to say, if you can't tell me what you want to do in a half page, anyway, my 2 cents on that. So I think less is more.
It's great feedback.
There you go.
What else?
So there's equal weighting to these 6 categories. There's equal weighting to leadership and governance, to project outcomes and valuations.
Yeah, I wouldn't agree with that, but let's
You
just
would
give
agree
it
that that's a good idea, or you?
I would not. But
How would you like to see us put more intention in the weighting?
I'd wait.
So if we ask more questions, it's going to raise the weight. So let's talk about kind of some of those benchmarks.
Personally, I'd want to know more about the project than the governance. but that's just
Agree.
me.
And we can always, even if we have more questions, we can just give them.
I didn't know that, so thanks for
double
bringing that up.
value
Wow.
if you place more.
Thanks for bringing that up. I
priority on it.
didn't see that. I didn't catch that.
What other kind of initial reactions or directions that you have for Karen and I, so that when we meet again, it's closer to what you really want to see as the finished product?
I mean, I would have had a lot more heft on the project.
Okay? Like throw some, for examples at me.
50%.
Okay?
50% of the evaluation weight
Yes.
is within the project scope.
Yeah.
So the general consensus with the group.
Because right now it's-
Wants to really weigh in heavier number-wise on that project scope and direction. Okay? Anything else really jump out? That's great feedback.
And the rest are probably equally as important. It's just that one section, I think, that's undervalued right now.
Any other thoughts, direction? I appreciate y'all's time and involvement. It's, 4 hours gone by pretty quick, isn't it?
You're good at leading this, both of y'all. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much for your direction and guidance and leadership.
Absolutely. Mr. McDonough, I'll turn it back over to you with the hammer.
All right, well, is anything else? Next meeting is Tuesday, the 12th of September at 1 o'clock, right here. Correct? Yep.
Wearing your snowsuit.
Meeting adjourned.